The clock strikes 12, I step into the haze. Whispers call me from 1,000 graves. Shadows dance in corners out of sight. I chase the unknown deep into the night. I hunt the fear you dare not face. In the darkness I embrace the trace. The dead, they speak their secrets shown. Welcome to the bizarre and the unknown. A flicker, a chill, a shadowed hand. The unseen lingers where I stand. Through creaking doors and empty halls, I hear the echoes of forgotten calls. I hunt the fear you dare not face. In the darkness I embrace the trace. The dead, they speak their secrets shown. Welcome to the bizarre and the unknown. And the unknown. Eyes that watch from a place unreal, a touch so cold it makes you feel they're near but hidden, veiled in shade. I walk with ghosts, I'm unafraid. I hunt the fear you dare not face. In the darkness I embrace the trace. The dead, they speak their secrets shown. Welcome to the bizarre and the unknown.
It's showtime.
Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Bizarre and the Unknown. I'm your host, E.D. Testerman. I am joined by three incredible people. Jason McLean, Ryan Paul Termblay, and Robert Prevo. Hey Tanya, today we're doing that panel on the supernatural. A lot of you guys want to be doing another panel. We've done them on cryptids, we've done them on supernatural, done them on paranormal. Now we're doing it on supernatural. So, with that being said, we're all here have got quite a bit of experience in dealing with a lot of this different stuff. So, I think this is going to be great coming together and doing all this. And Ryan, little bro, Roxanne. So it's going to be a fun show. So make sure you got your questions ready. Put them in caps. I will probably miss them, and I've missed them before on panels. So please put them in caps when you have your questions. Roxanne will help me in case I've missed one. We may not get to your question right off the bat. As soon as I get a chance, we will get to your questions. With that being said, gentlemen, thank you for joining me on this panel. How you all doing tonight?
So far, so good. Pleasure to be here, sir.
Yeah, I'm doing well, man.
Yep, happy to be here.
Heck yeah. So I always like to let my guests kind of explain a little bit about them and their experiences. So, Jason, if you wouldn't mind, I'll let you start first and we'll work our way down and get to everybody.
Author, illustrator, biblical paranormal researcher, and most of my work up until a little while ago was on creation, advocacy, and eschatology. But you get roped in one way or the other, and you end up writing things like Metroplex Monsters, Dallas Demons, Fort Worth Goatmen, and Other Terrors of the Trinity River, available wherever fine rags or fine books and trashy rags are sold. I have to do that at least 2 more times per my contract. No, it's so yeah. I mean, a lot. You get out there, you do the work. I guess what drug me into all of this was seeing a living pterosaur when I was 12, and it's all been downhill from there. So,
Robert, if you
So my name's Robert Prevo. I've got Monstrous the podcast. I run Monstrous the group on Facebook. Lifelong experiencer as far as the paranormal, supernatural, UFOs, cryptids, all that fun stuff. I've been a researcher and investigator for over 30 years on cryptids and all that fun stuff. Also a writer. Just recently put out Animology Volume 1, and Animology has to do with the process of investigating all these different things. So it's kind of bringing all of it, like cryptozoology, the paranormal, UFOs, all under one umbrella and establishing protocols and all that fun stuff. And I just put this out too. So
heck yeah.
got a few books out, writing on more. Matter of fact, Termblay and I are about to team up on one. So yeah, lots of fun.
Heck yeah. Ryan?
Everybody already knows me, Eric. Everybody knows I'm the soon-to-be author. I'm the Wendigo and Skinwalker guy. I've been in this stuff for about 20 plus years now, so it's been a long road.
Thank you. Well, we've actually got quite a few new subscribers since I've had you on my show last, Ryan. It's we're growing.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's nice. So I love. I mean, all of the 3 of these guys in here. I strongly suggest everybody go follow them. There's a lot of good information there. You can't go wrong with it. It's like William and I always say, never take what I say for granted. Take it with a grain of salt and do your own research.
Yep.
Much like the Native American people did, they would sit in a circle around something and discuss it and then take a break, come back and sit in a different spot where you sit from a different angle. That's why I suggest go out and look at these other podcasters, these other researchers, these other investigators, because they can have a different view on something than what I do or any of them do. Doesn't make them right and me wrong, or me right and them wrong. It just means they have a different experience, a different view. And that's how we come together and learn this stuff, is by discussing it. Ryan, me, for example, he believes in, the bloodline and the boundaries, where I don't when it comes to supernatural, just because of my experiences. Doesn't mean he's right and I'm wrong, or I'm right and he's wrong. It just means we have a different intake on it. And that's why we love it. I don't look down on him for that. I don't look down on anybody else for their beliefs on it. I just don't, we just have a difference. And that's what makes this great. Hey, Scott.
Yeah, in the circle, everybody's equal.
Exactly. Before I forgot to tell you guys, with your books, if you should be able to access the chat. Make sure you put links into the chat where people can look and find your books. You should be able to. If not, shoot me a message on Messenger and I'll get them plugged in for you. That way people can find your books. Still waiting on Ryan's.
Yep, of course.
Yeah. I remember saying something recently about that to Ryan. So.
You say something every day about those, so.
Slacker.
I am a total slacker.
Yeah. So hey, Freaky. So let's get this shindig kicked off. One of the most common things is how they see supernatural and cryptids together. I'll let you guys. I want to hear your guys' thoughts on that, and then we'll get into some of what people say. There's some things I believe that may not be supernatural, more paranormal with them, and some things that could be. But I would love to hear your guys' view and opinions on, is the supernatural tied with cryptids?
Ooh.
Well, who do you want to go first?
I say, Robert, well, you started with Jason first on the intro, so let's go with Robert first on this one.
All right, sure, not a problem. So I think the answer is both yes and no. I think it has to do with several different things, depending on the situation, depending on your definition of paranormal and supernatural as well. Different people have a different level of understanding as far as what paranormal and supernatural is. Typically, when I would say supernatural, I'm thinking of an entity who is like you're looking at a jinn or a fae or something like that, something that has always been what it is. You're not looking at maybe uh, ghost or something what I would consider more paranormal. Paranormal is kind of a weird word anyway. It was a bastardization of the use of parapsychology, and so it's kind of weird. It kind of sets in a limbo. But yes, in that I've been on a number of Bigfoot investigations and Dogman investigations where we've had things that were rather paranormal or supernatural happen. Um, the knocking sounds, the orbs, the flashing lights in the middle of the forest, um, a lot of different things like that. So it may not necessarily be tied to the cryptids as much as it is that these things are simultaneously going on and we just happen to be experiencing all of those things at the same time.
Like when you're deer hunting and a bird shows up, you wouldn't conflate the bird and the deer at the same, just because they're in the same place at the same time.
Right.
There you go.
Okay. Cool. Jason?
Well, so this is where, again, things get a little messy, right? In this, I would say I have a similar view that just because there's both going on doesn't necessarily mean they are connected. However, what I will say is this: I don't know that we have a good enough understanding of the universe necessarily to know when we're even encountering most cryptids, right? For me, for something to be cryptozoological, I do like the term that Ryan helped coin, the paracryptid, right? Which is something that appears to be cryptozoological but is not, right? For me, for something to be cryptozoological, it needs to be what I call a nobi, or a naturally occurring biological entity. That would be like a cat,
Right.
a dog,
Yep.
a cow, right? It's something that exists on this plane of this plane of reality. It's always supposed to be here. It is naturally biological. The thing is, things that are supernatural, paranormal, we'll just let those two words hang in the vein of we don't really know or understand what it is. It's very clear that these entities can appear as whatever they would seem to want to be like. And I would even go so far as to say that a lot of it's culturally derived, right? Because if you take that bigger step back, there's a lot of patterns across all cultures as far as how things behave. It's just each culture, it calls them by a different name or then throws folklore on it. Something Ryan and I were talking about is folklore is not phenomenon, right? And which is not to say that folklore is irrelevant, but we need to understand what folklore is. It is a culture trying to understand something and placing it within a worldview. That's not what the thing itself is. So I think it gets, whether or not cryptids and the supernatural are the intertwined, I don't know that we have a good enough understanding of reality to know if a lot of these, what we're calling cryptids, are just entities pretending to be something or taking on a cultural form that we are then applying the idea of cryptozoology to. And I would even say I'm not convinced that that's not a deliberate act so that we will interact with them.
It's a good answer. I like that.
Yeah, that's a really good answer. Jeez, Jason, put us all to shame, bro.
I can't just be a pretty face, man. I mean, that's for free, right?
That's great. That is great. But,
so Ryan,
it's a slippery slope for me, though. With the stuff that I specialize in, there's people that call Wendigo and Skinwalkers cryptids, which they're not. Okay, so that is the supernatural for me. But with Bigfoot encounters, you do have, like the glowing eyes, the internally glowing eyes, where there's no light source. They're in complete darkness, and somehow their eyes are lighting up. So where does that come from? That's not biological, right? That's got to be a supernatural or paranormal event. So it's really hard to actually divide these things up and decide what's what and what goes where. That's where I stand on this.
Cool.
Something I say a lot is we ain't got the Spookatron 5000 patent pending. So like when it comes to something that's on the other side of the veil, right? Paranormal, supernatural, whatever, we don't have a way of objectively observing it, right?
That's right.
And this is not me downing anybody who uses EM field meter or anything like that. But what I'm saying is people will say, well, we have these field readers. Like, well, hold on. You can't know for certain if you're measuring the entity, the effect on, say, the local space that the entity is having. Like if you're walking through water, you have the ripples go out, or if that entity is just directly jacking with your machine to play with you.
Yes.
We don't know which of the three is actually happening with whether it's a Geiger counter, an EM field meter, anything. And so there's, I fear that in a lot of cases, in a lot of these things, we are going in with a lot of assumptions that may open us up for a lot of problems down the road. And a lot of in confusion that these entities may be wanting to gin up by, again, conflating the idea of the paranormal and the physical. Because how many times have we heard people, I mean, for decades now, say, yes, it was a Bigfoot and it disappeared. It had, like you said, glowing eyes. The story I tell all the time is you wake up in your room and there's a 7-foot tall solid black entity with red glowing eyes. You've seen a shadow person, you've seen a demon, whatever phrase you want to use. You unzip your tent and you see the exact same thing. Suddenly it's a Bigfoot. Right. And what do we do with Bigfoot now? Well, now we got to go run and find there's the newest sighting. We need to run out there quick. Let's leave apples for it. Let's knock on trees. The phrase "knock on wood." What were you doing? You were contacting the elves. Literally, that was the Fae. So it's like, you dig deep enough in a lot of people. It's like, well, where are the Bigfoot when you're not seeing them? Well, maybe they're in tunnels underground that we can't find. Where's Fairyland?
Right.
Yeah.
You're absolutely right.
There's now again, does that mean it's the phenomena, or is that our culture just sort of recycling these older Fae ideas into a new form? Right. Again, folklore is not the phenomena.
Right.
And Bigfoot absolutely occupies that space in our culture 100%. So it doesn't mean that's what's actually happening. It just means he's occupying that space, which is why people talk about Bigfoot braiding, horses' manes and things like that. It's like, well, you go to Ireland or you go to Europe and they're fairy braids, or 100 years ago, those were witches' braids, right? Now they're Bigfoot braids. The concept is occupying that space culturally from a folkloric perspective, but I don't know that that's not also deliberate from these. I'll call them supernatural entities because I think they are naturally supernatural. To coin, to use a twist of phrase there, which means they may be trying to make us believe that they are physical, so that we will be far less protected, and that we will actually engage in things that allow them access to us.
That's interesting. A lot of what you're saying is actually echoes from like Shock Valet, Passport to Magonia, and Cutchins and Renner whenever they did Where the Footprints End, Volume 1 and 2. A lot of that, there's a lot of mix that has to do with the supernatural, the Fae, aliens, cryptids. It just kind of all, because there's a lot of people who are Bigfoot researchers, investigators who get out there, and these tracks either start or stop in the middle of a field for absolutely no reason. And they never pick up again, or like we were talking about with the eye shine and different stuff like that. Now, the eye shine, I will say, I think there is a biological reason behind why some of these creatures have eye shine. But when you put in to the mix the supernatural, the paranormal, what like you were talking about with the shadow figures with the same or similar eye shine, you gotta take note of that, because there's something going on that I don't think we're paying attention to. And I agree 110% with what Jason said. I don't think we understand enough about reality to start making any rash judgments.
I agree.
One way or the other.
Well,
there are
and
some cool things that take place, though. I mean, I don't know if you guys have heard this, but I've heard people say that Bigfoot is radioactive now. That they actually use
Yes.
Geiger counters when they're going out there.
Yeah. A friend of mine was actually sort of helped. Was their group started the whole bringing Geiger counters out into the field, and it sort of caught on from there. Which, so let me throw another wrench into the spoke on the conversation. Sorry, that's what I do. I'm super hot and I screw up conversations. It's what I'm here for.
Oh my God.
In the same way that electrical wiring that is done in poorly in a house can create EM fields that can actually affect the human brain. Like, we know that.
Yes.
Radiation can do the same thing.
Yep.
It is entirely possible, and this is one of those other things. It's entirely possible that, again, it's not just that we don't understand how the supernatural works. We don't understand how this place works, and that there could be, for any number of reasons that we haven't cataloged yet, random fields of electromagnetic energy and or radioactivity that pop up and move and jack with our perceptions of reality from time to time. And that may be part of this. Like, it's not that Bigfoot's radioactive or whatever, but rather there is a naturally occurring field of radiation that comes and goes for whatever reason, right? People's brains are affected by it. And then it starts becoming psychological. Now they think that there's a Bigfoot there, or they think that there's something else going on. Or maybe that field allows a supernatural entity enough power to access our reality and jack with us directly. I don't know that I have an opinion as to how it's. Again, I think the problem is we try and figure out how something works, but we have no way of testing it. My concern is, as part of the conversation, hey, there may be more going on here that's actually physical, but it's physical in a way that we're not cognizant of, because we have an assumption as to how the world works, and I don't think we've actually figured that part out yet at all.
No, we've got a long way to go.
Yeah. Well, and people, so I look at things on a scientific level. I originally was going through college to be a forensics officer. I love science. Science is one of my favorite subjects next to history. Okay. People don't realize, or they forget, we all have a level of radioactive numbers to us.
Yeah.
The bigger you are, the more the number is.
Yes.
We absorb radiation daily. Pockets of radiation pop up through Mother Earth constantly every single day. They're just not at the levels that's dangerous to us in most cases. Now, that's not all cases. There is cases where quite a bit of it does come up, and it is harmful to us. Too much radiation can jack us up. But we have to have a certain amount of radiation within us in order for us to survive. And I've always said this, Bigfoot and stuff like that, they are flesh and blood just like we are. We can make babies with them. They can make babies with us. It's very well documented in multiple historical accounts. If that's the case, if we have radiation within us, they would too. They're bigger, denser, bulkier than we are. We would stand to reason why they'd have a higher level than we would. So I can see where a Geiger counter may come in handy in that situation. As far as them being radioactive themselves, to a point, yes, they are, but not to the point that we're conditioned to think of radioactive nowadays, because we don't teach that in general education anymore, like they did when I was a kid.
Yeah.
If that, I don't know if that makes sense or not, but that's kind of how I look at it.
Well, the electromagnetic field is actually considered a type of radiation in the first place. So, it's...
One thing to look at, though, Eric, is in a lot of these cases where Bigfoot gives off any signs of radioactivity, people hear that loud metallic dinging. They say it sounds like a dumpster just being dropped from the sky, and they hear a loud boom. That's when they pick up the radioactivity. So is that like an energy field collapsing or opening up? What is that? Is it even the Bigfoot? We don't know.
They're in nature more than we are, so they would absorb it more than we would. We have gotten away from nature. Yes. And that's our biggest problem. And that's why when I come to this on my side of the paranormal, supernatural, dealing with cryptids, is this. Jason, I believe, as you said it correctly, the Fae. We have Fae that is around us constantly. The Fae is a term we use because, yes, it comes from Celtic mythology. A lot of Celts here, a lot of Germanic people here. Fae is something that's very, very steeped in Celtic mythology. We're part of the Appalachians. I'm in the Ozarks, and the Ozarks was the largest mountain range in the world that was attached to the Appalachians at one point in time until erosion brought it down. That's why so many of the lure and the myths with Appalachians is tied to Ozarks mountains, is because of that. We have the Fae here. I have experienced the Fae here. Me, I'm not a tree knocker. I don't believe Bigfoot is going out and knocking on trees. I'm sorry, there's no scientific proof that they're doing that, because you don't have damaged trees out there, and something that big banging on a tree is going to jack that tree up. They're also going to know of the dryads that live in trees, and you don't go knocking on a tree unless you have a question to ask that dryad. Otherwise, you will upset it and it will jack with you. And then you get to the orb side of it. I don't believe all the orbs are supernatural. I don't believe Bigfoot is turning into an orb. I believe that's either the partial manifestation of a previous Bigfoot that's passed away, which most common in paranormal activity, most common manifestation you see is an orb, a partial manifestation. A partial apparition is the next one. A full body is even rarer than that. The most common is an orb. So I think some of these are the spirits of past Bigfoot that has come in. Now, they also know the Fae. If we know it, they know it. If, they deal with the Fae constantly. So you have the, I forgot, was it not the pixie? Is it the pixie? It looks like the firefly? I forgot off the top of my head. Anyways, you got that one that comes around, looks like an orb. That could be where the supernatural side of it comes with Bigfoot, is the fact that these Fae are flying around with them because they're assisting them. They've asked for help, or because they are so connected with nature that it's just a symbiotic relationship they have with cryptids, in the fact that they go around and assist them and are with them. That's just my opinion.
Yeah.
Interesting theory. I like it.
I'm just wondering why I'm not getting kitty kisses too, and Robert got left out too. That just hurts my feelings. But so I would say I think there's sufficient evidence to point to there being. I think the problem with Bigfoot is we're putting a lot of things in one box and labeling it Bigfoot, which is what's causing the problem to begin with, right?
Yeah.
Anything you can talk to can lie to you. I'll just say that up front. I don't think that if you are speaking with or communing with an entity, I don't think it's Bigfoot at all. I think it's I think there's sufficient evidence for there to be something physical that's being called Bigfoot, and it may actually be multiple physical phenomena as well. But these are very small, highly mobile groups of entities that are beings that are trying to keep the hell away from us. So the problem is when we see one, we're seeing where they're crossing into where we will see them, right? I call it the green wall. What do? We build cities, and then we build roads, and we mow, and we get rid of all the tall grasses and everything up to a tree line, so that water can pool off and whatever. And then we mow right up to that tree line, and then you have the tree line, and then you have all of the small shrub brushes grow up around it. And then once you get inside that tree line, it's entirely open, right? Because the trees have blocked off the light for everything else. But you can't see 3 feet into that line. I can march an army through the Dallas-Fort Worth area. No one would ever see them. Right. Because we build these little concrete islands, and we drive on these concrete bridges, metaphorical, right? And we've isolated the really wild places. I mean, even Dallas-Fort Worth, one of the largest conurbations in the country, if you look at it from a satellite, it's mostly green. We're not really living out in it. Most people will never go more than 100 yards off of some kind of road, even a dirt road, right? But the vast majority are never going more than a mile off of a concrete road. So I think a lot of these creatures, are the biological ones anyway, are just staying the hell away from us.
Yeah.
That having been said, the paranormal, the supernatural ones, I think they're more, if you go out looking for something, I think they're kind of happy to show up. And be like, oh, you want to parlay? I'll give you something to parlay with. I do think that, again, the word fae is just cultural nomenclature. right?
Right.
I think we get we get into the habit too much of thinking, oh, well, it's a fae, or it's a this, or it's a that's. Like, whoa, hold on. Those are terms from other cultures and in cultures past, and we've adopted on this, but we're now adopting the folklore of that, the mythology of those stories. And it's like,
Yep.
again, take that bigger step back. What if it's all just the same thing?
Yes.
And our cultures are interpreting how we interact with them, and they're just playing by those rules. It means the pixie, the elf, the gnome, the gray alien from Zeta Reticuli, the space brother, and maybe the Bigfoot that likes to disappear like Predator are all the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just interacting with you in a way that you can that you're culturally prepared to interpret it. Or, and again, I think that means, oh, well, it's because it's what you already believe. I'm not saying that.
Mhm.
These entities are a hell of a lot smarter than you are. And if their entire job is to mess with you,
Mm-hmm.
they will do and appear in a way that will best mess with you, if they want to mess with you at all, if they have access to you. And that's where, Ryan, I can't remember if we talked about this. I know I've talked about this with Tex before. One of the great worries and concerns I've had over the last few years, really thinking about it, what is the one thing every culture on the planet has said about these entities? Don't use their names.
Mm-hmm.
Don't
Yep.
use their names, or they'll show up. What have we done over the last 60 years with Bigfoot and everything else in the paranormal? Now we're talking about all kinds of things. We're using their names. We're doing podcasts. We're going out. We're leaving recording devices out. We're asking things to talk to us. It may be people are like, oh, hey, the veil is thinning because we're getting all this activity. Maybe we're getting all this activity because we're inviting it in.
We're
Mhm.
opening up that veil.
Yeah,
Yeah, we're the one
ones
thinning the veil.
unlocking it.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So along that line, though, I got a question for everybody on panel. So Dogman, the appearance of how they were before has changed drastically over the years. You're familiar with this, Prevo. So Linda
Yep.
Godfrey, when she did her book, she talked about how they were like 4, 5 feet tall. They were really skinny, kind of athletic. Nowadays, we have those big Arnold Schwarzenegger types. And, they get the big muscles. They're huge. They're gigantic. Do you think maybe there's like supernatural entities taking on the form of these would-be Dogman, or do you think there's something else going on?
I think there's a combination of things going on, just like with everything else. I think you can trace the Dogman stuff back even farther than the Michigan Dogman and the stuff that happened in Wisconsin. Then you get
Yes.
into what they used to call the devil monkeys. Well, the devil monkey looks a whole lot and fits into the whole Dogman story quite well.
Yeah.
So we had a lot of that popped up in the Appalachians. We had that popped up in Canada and several different places in the Ozarks as well. There was a lot of stories of devil monkeys from here.
Arizona as well.
Mm.
Yeah, exactly. So, and those generally fit into that same morphology and everything that Linda talked about, where they were 5, 6 foot tall. Even there were even stories of these things in Wisconsin, kind of bouncing, kind of hopping or jumping up. I think it may even track back to the 70s and 80s, where we had a lot of these kangaroo sightings too.
Oh yeah.
So
Thank
I
you for
think
mentioning that. Thank you for
You're
mentioning
welcome.
it. That's one of my favorite things that nobody like. I think some of the best stories nobody ever talks about anymore. But please continue. That's one, and that's absolutely one of them.
No,
Mhm.
you're right. I'm a big fan of John Keel and a lot of his work and his writing, and he's the one who really culminated a lot of that stuff together. But I think that definitely you have to take a lot of things into consideration when you talk about Dogman. Number one, you've got people who are huge fans of werewolves, and they really want these things to look a specific way. I don't think they necessarily have encountered or saw something. They want to be the 15 minutes of fame. They want to
Yeah.
be included. They want to be a part of it. They saw this massive monster who looks like Arnold Schwarzenegger or looks like, the werewolf out of Underworld or whatever. Um, so there's that. And I would say out of 100%, I would say a good 50% are those. I would say another 25% are probably misidentifications, where people are
Mhm.
seeing animals well-known animals, probably bears and things like that, and they're misidentifying these things. But then that's going to leave 25% where I think people are actually coming into contact with something. Now, out of that 25%, how many of those are biological and how many of them are paranormal or supernatural? I would say you could probably break that into thirds if you're without, really analyzing the data.
Mhm.
So then I would say that definitely there are things out there that either want to entertain themselves, want to entertain you, or, are just simply going to appear in a way that you can relate to. Even if it puts you in shock, you can relate to it. You've seen enough werewolf movies, you've seen enough Bigfoot movies and things like that. It knows a form that it can take on. So just like Jason was talking about, I believe there are things, if you want to call it Fae, or you want to call it yokai, or kami, or you want to call it jinn, or you want to call it something else. There are these things out there that either in a defensive way or something, it's like, oh shit, I'm caught. You know, they're going to take on a form and then beat feet and get out of there. But I think they do get entertained sometimes simply by the fact that they can scare the living bejesus out of us, and maybe that opens that veil enough that they want to come back and
Mhm.
come back and come back. And yes,
Mhm.
they do get stronger and they do more things. So yeah, really interesting stuff. Absolutely.
Well, and there's a lot of the supernatural side of that feeds off of fear. So they're going to
Yes.
come to an image and display itself in an image that causes you the most fear because it's feeding off of that fear. And that's something that a lot of us don't put in considerations. When you're seeing an 8 foot tall Bigfoot with red glowing eyes, not red reflective eyes, there's a big difference between
Hmm.
reflective and
And
self
glowing.
illuminating,
Yeah.
Yes.
glowing.
Mhm.
I think you're more looking on the side of the evil supernatural side of it, the ones that's feeding off of your fear. I was on a werewolf
Maybe.
investigation not too long ago. It's one of the very few times I've been ran out of the woods. The fact that some of that thermal imaging you've seen on my intro was me on that investigation. And this is one of the very few times I've been ran out of the woods by something. And it wasn't a werewolf. This straight up was old. You can tell it was old. It was evil, and it wanted me. If I would have followed it, I wouldn't be talking to you right now. That is the type,
Hmm.
and you can tell that it has that energy. You can tap into that energy and go, hey, this thing it's got some evil to it. It's got evil
Yep.
intentions for me. And that's like when I go on a paranormal investigation, I always do what's called any type of investigation period. I do what's called an initial investigation. I want to go to that area, see what the energy's like in that area, kind of tell what I was doing. And that's what I was doing on this werewolf investigation. I went down to do an initial investigation. I wanted to get boots on the ground, see what the energy was like in that area, see what else could be there. And what I ran into was not what I was searching for. And I was not equipped to protect myself against what was there. This was
Hmm.
old. This is older than most man, I would say. Man, that's probably older than mankind. That's you can tell this.
Hmm.
And I hightailed it out of there. And that's the stuff we deal with on this. I've had paranormal investigations where when I went in and done an initial investigation, I was like, yeah, this is paranormal. This is going to be good. I ain't got to worry about nothing. And that was the first and only time I made this mistake. And so I didn't bring no protection with me. Halfway through the investigation, it went south, and it went south bad. There was more than paranormal. There was supernatural in on this building as well. And I think that supernatural was the dominant. A lot of
Hmm.
people don't realize that in these areas, paranormal or supernatural, you're going to have a dominant. And if it's anything paranormal, your supernatural is going to be that dominant
Hmm.
there. It's going to be the one that controls things. It's going to be the one that dictates what happens. And they can hide their energy from you. These things are
Yeah.
smart. They've had millions upon millions of years. I mean, God, well, let's put this, we don't know. They've had more time than humankind has to
Hmm.
perfect their craft.
Well,
And
you
that's
want to talk about run it into something that feeds off fear. I had a face
mm,
to face with the Hat Man.
mm,
Yeah, way back. Ryan's heard the story, and I think I've got it on my channel. But
mhm.
yeah, you want to talk about something that feeds on fear? I'll tell you right now, that does. So yeah, I get where you're coming from.
So it's kind of a Freddy Krueger effect in a way.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Feeds off the fear and gets stronger the more fear it takes in.
Yes.
I don't want to escape the dog man conversation too early because but I do want to chime in on the Hat Man thing because I've got a story. It's actually 3 stories, but it's one event or one situation. I have to be very, very vague about it. But along those lines of fear, I think one of the reasons and I'll keep this clean. I think one of the reasons there are misdeeds done to children so often is that it's a cheap and easy way to create trauma that breaks familial boundaries and trust and can allow these entities access. There was an individual personally known to me that happened to him as a child. He was suffering. He came to me because he's like, "Look, I've got this shadow." You know, he was having the sleep paralysis demons show up, right? And again, sometimes it is just sleep paralysis, but anytime the things show up, it's like, okay. So I was helping him through it, and we got it all stopped. You know, for me, it's always about forgiveness. Like the first thing I always tell people, like, look, if you've got these things showing up, just start playing Christian music while you go to sleep. They don't like it, but the other thing is you have to forgive. You have to heal the trauma right through forgiveness. And again, getting better with God. That's me. That's what I do. Again, biblical paranormal researcher. I'm not going to shy away from that. Now, that being said, while this is going on, the reason he came to me was his daughter one night because he thought it was just psychological, right? That's the general thing. His daughter one night woke up and saw a dark entity move, got up to get water and saw something move in the hallway and go into his room one night. The same night he had, I think she came and asked him in the morning, like, "Hey, I saw this thing," and he had the same event. 2 other individuals who lived near this person, like one house away, right? One person saw, again, young, and this part is really important. The first one was a child who was too young to know what a xenomorph from the Alien movies were.
Right.
But she woke up in the middle of the night, looked out, and saw a thing standing under a street light that was right across the street, you know, from the person. And she basically described a xenomorph, but with large blank eyes.
Whoa.
Right? But even longer, like the anglerfish kind of teeth, right?
Right.
So it's not 1-to-1, but it's like that's a close equivalent. Later got a report from someone else who saw something similar not in the backyard, but the fence had blown down from a recent storm, and they had the dogs tied up to, you know, use the restroom, whatever, but so they wouldn't escape. Anyway, they start going nuts. He goes outside and sees, and he's like, "I swear to you, this is going to sound insane, but it looked like one of those things from the Alien movies, but it was red and it had these big eyes and razor, you know, needle-like teeth." And it looked at me and I grabbed the dogs, ran inside. And I've had other reports from people not anywhere near this thing that they have seen similar things, right? And H.R. Geiger, if you really look into where he was getting a lot of his biomechanical designs, it was being on drugs and interacting with supernatural.
Yep.
So again, my experience is yours. These things particularly the dark stuff, is absolutely feeding on fear. It's feeding on trauma. It's feeding on unrepentant, I would say even unrepentant sin. But it is the angst and the fear, the sadness, the anger that you wallow in. Is they again feed in quotation marks because I don't have a better word for it. Right? I'm not going to sit here and say that they're eating it like you would eat a pizza.
Right.
But they are clearly attracted to it for a reason. They like causing it for a reason. They're getting something from it. So, you know, I'm right there with you on that.
Photosynthesis.
Yeah.
I think we often get too, because again, let me piss a lot of people off. Science is a form of folklore. Whether you like it or not. If you tell your kids you need to brush your teeth twice a day, that's folklore. From a purely academic perspective, that is folklore. The belief that science can actually help you understand reality, that's an act of folklore.
Yep.
Our culture has science as its cultural myth, right? We have this belief that we can measure and weigh and come to understand reality. And I think we can to a point, but we need to know when our abilities sort of stop, right? We want to classify everything. We want to put things in a box and say, we know what this is. Well, you can do that with a gopher, because you can grab a gopher and put it in a box and watch it, right? You can poke it with a stick. You can pet a quokka. They are adorable. You can't do any of these things to whatever it is that we're interacting with.
Not yet.
Yeah, not yet. Again, the Spookatron 5000 is still being worked on.
Mm-hmm.
But
I'm definitely a science guy, so I guess
Yeah.
I'm a folklore guy. But I'm definitely. I mean, I've got my degree in biology and evolutionary science and genetics and all that stuff. So I mean, I get what you're saying. I definitely get what you're saying, and you're absolutely right. But I'm definitely more of a science guy than I am anything else. So
Well, and it's like I always say, there's mainstream science, which is the one that's blasted out to us every single day. Now, true science actually deals with, originated from alchemy and stuff like that. That's where science had actually originated from, was from alchemy. But true science actually gets to the truth of something by theories. You start off with an opinion. You put that opinion in a hypothesis. Then you take that hypothesis, then you put it into a theory. Yeah. So
let's get in there. You got to do the sales pitch, man.
Yeah, that's true science. So
that is exactly what all of this is. That's what this is. This is science being used to do all of those things that we're talking about. It's developing processes, protocols, how you form hypotheses, how you form theories, how you use it in paranormal, cryptozoological, all those things. So, and that's just book one. I've got 6 of these that are going to be coming out, and it's basically a college course on how to do this stuff and do it properly. Setting aside biases and understanding what evidence is. And a lot of people put all of their eggs in literally the basket of the eyewitness. And what the eyewitness has to say. Well, I'm sorry to tell you, but what the eyewitness has to say is not true evidence. I mean, that's perception from a subjective point of view.
Well, you got adrenaline, which can objectively alter your view. You have rationality, which can objectively alter your point of view of what's happening. That's why when we interview somebody, we usually ask them the same questions a couple times to see where it comes out, because things change as your adrenaline's up versus when your adrenaline's down and all that. So we have to take, crap. Dude, you almost yanked my, come on, bro. No, you don't even bet my suit. I want to hit a couple things up before we move on. We do have a question I've got to get to, but first off, when it comes to, we were talking about Dogman and Werewolf earlier. The term Dogman was coined in 1984. It's a relatively new term. Before then, they were known as werewolves. They were known as lichens, and the list goes on of different names. And you're talking about height. There is so many ancient cultures out there to talk about these things being humanoid size. So now, what was the size of the person back then? There could be places, depending on the evolving of that creature in that area to fit its environment, there could be the 4-foot size ones. They could be the 5-foot and above ones. India is a prime example of that. They got a tribe of dog-headed men that live up in the mountains that you don't go mess with them because they'll jack your world up. And they're known to come down and trade and stuff like this. But throughout history, all ancient history, it talks about these dog-headed people. There is a difference between what we call Dogman now, and there's a difference between werewolf. Flesh and blood. This is still flesh and blood, but it takes supernatural powers, dark magic, to create this one.
Yes.
I put werewolf in the supernatural side because of the magic effect that it takes to create the werewolf. Not the dog-headed man, the werewolf. They're two different things. They look different. They act different. Everything is different about them. The only thing is similar is the head, and even that changes depending on where you're at.
Yep.
And that's my opinion on that.
Well, and also like the Sinifali that you're referring to, right? They were people who had villages. They wore clothes. They're not related to. Seemingly, they don't. There's not a lot of overlap between them and the new Dogman phenomena that we're
not one bit. I even got into that in my book. a lot of it, they talk about Saint Christopher. Saint Christopher was one
Yeah.
of the cyanocephaly. Well, what it is he was actually from Canaan.
Hmm.
And when you get into the Latin and you look at Canaan and Canaanite, the word canine looks a whole lot like it.
Mhm.
And that was a mistranslation. They also believe that the people who were from the land of Canaan were cannibals and they were
Mhm.
monsters. Well,
Yes.
he apparently changed because he, became a Christian and everything. But he wasn't the only one, because you then also have the stories from Marco Polo,
Yeah.
from Julius Caesar, from all of those. And
Mhm.
guess what? You ever heard a fishing story where a fisherman went out and he told you the truth about every single fish he ever caught?
Yeah.
Me neither, because these guys have been gone a long time and they came back and they had stories about giant rabbits who had swords. They had human beings who only had one leg. They had human beings who didn't have a head, had
But
everything down here.
yeah.
And along with that, they also had the cyanocephaly. So they were trying to impart all of these crazy stories upon people to impress upon them. Oh, you've got to see the magical worlds that we've all been to. There wasn't a shred of truth to any of it. It was all a matter of telling stories to make people more interested in what they were doing. Marco Polo, he's been gone for so long. I wonder what the hell that guy's doing over there. Well, he comes back and he tells all these stories about what he's been doing in all these magical lands. Because nobody
Mhm.
wants to hear, well, we just kind of rode camels for 30 days.
Yeah.
That's
Well,
boring.
And
You
they
know?
were also
it is boring. Yeah.
and they were
Yeah.
they were also passing on what they had heard themselves from, again, local
Exactly.
folklore, things like that. Yeah.
Exactly. But again, that's folklore. The cyanocephaly is all folklore. There's never been any evidence. There's never been a shred of truth to any of that stuff. Nobody's ever come up again with a body, with a head, with anything from out of India, from out of Iran, Iraq, anywhere in there. Although we've heard story after story supposedly coming from out of there. But again, covered that in the book, dove into it really deep. And there's just nothing to support any of those stories.
You see that with real animals too, known animals like mountain gorillas. Once
Mhm.
upon a time they were saying they were ravenous and they came down and kidnapped women and children.
Yep.
Everybody thought they were these big giant monsters, and lo and behold, it's a mountain gorilla. So that's what happens. They create stories and folklore around it, and boom, create a monster.
Yep. Yep.
Yep. And this is one of those things where, again, staying on the Dogman thing for a moment, I think we are being foolish if we remove the Dogman phenomena from the Hellhound phenomena,
Yes.
which is much older.
Yes.
Agreed.
And again, in Linda Godfrey's book, one of the stories, the night watchman for a church, right, steps out, sees this thing, it turns around in the graveyard and says, Gadara, and runs off.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the fact that things, again, if it's talking to you,
Right.
you got a problem. But it's I think it was telling him what it was, right? Gadara, that's where Jesus casts out the demoniac.
Legion. Oh,
Yeah, Legion. Yeah.
Mhm.
So it's there are Hellhound stories. I've got a Hellhound story. It wasn't mine personally, but someone who's known personally to me, and it freaked him out a lot. But I think if we remove the Hellhound equation from this, like, well, no, a Hellhound is different from a Dogman. You don't know that.
No.
There's no way to know that. And again, the beast of Gévaudan, right?
Yep.
That thing killed people. Like, they were hunting for it, and nobody seemed to be able to hurt this thing.
Yep.
I think there's, again, it's the idea of the canine, the vicious canine. And I think this is something, again, I don't think it's purely cultural, but I do think it's taking that form for a reason. But that form is much, much older. And maybe the reason it goes from being 5 feet to Jack Arnold Schwarzenegger, and I'm 51% joking, furries.
Yeah.
I'm not, and I'm only 51% joking.
No, you're right.
Because it's like, once you started having, now all of a sudden you had furry art show up, and now you started having and now people are out looking for, again, these things seem to take our culture seems to interact with them, either giving them permission or allowing them a form that we can connect to.
Hmm.
So
And
do you think
all of a sudden,
maybe they
Furry
took,
Art blows up, and now these things are Arnold Schwarzenegger. I'm just saying.
Yep.
well, do you think maybe they took canine form because that's going to get more visceral response from humans? Because we view canines as our companions, as our best friends, our
Yeah.
guardians, our protectors. You know, we trust them with our children. So if something were to take the shape of a canine and kind of, you know, twist it and make it a damned kind of thing, you know, it's going to affect us psychologically. We're going to be like, what the hell's going on here? You know, it's going
But
to really
dog.
in the same sense, we almost have a genetic fear of wolves because
That's
wolves
where
have
I was going. Yeah.
always been. Oh, wolves have
Mhm.
always been one of the main predators. I mean, you go back into Norway and even parts of Canada,
Yeah.
back around the 17th, 16th centuries. There were wolves that were taking out children left and right. I mean,
Yes.
it was bad. So a wolf always has that predator. The flip side of the coin as far as the canine goes. We have our protectors, we have the ones that we love, but those can even turn against us and
Mhm.
awaken that primal fear. So yeah, definitely. Every cult, and it goes across every culture because dogs are everywhere man is.
Mhm.
And you get into Japanese culture, African
Yep.
culture, Australian culture, the dogs are always there, both good and bad.
Yeah.
So yeah, yeah, you can't rule out any of that as far as folklore and experience, the human experience. Whenever you look at Dogman, I think it's if you set that aside, you're doing an injustice to the story of the Dogman.
And there's so many cultures that talk about dog man, and they talk about werewolves. Okay, Native American is a prime example. They'll tell you there's these dog headed people. Then they'll tell you, you know, there's many different types. Most common one we know is an SW, but you have the dog
Mhm.
soldiers that they could transform. So many Native American cultures talk about these two different types. So if it was something going, oh, I just as a
Hold on though. Hold on with the
forward
dog
porridge.
soldiers though. So okay, when you look at the dog soldiers, you have to look at it from two different points of view. There's the literal point of view in which they turn into actual dogs. Now the metaphorical one is they turned into dogs in the sense that they acted like animals. Okay, so these men didn't turn into werewolves. They didn't drop to their floors and grow fur. What they did is they fought so viciously and so savagely and didn't back down
Yeah.
that the settlers called them dogs because they were fighting like dogs. They were not backing down. They were not yielding. They were, you know, yelling and charging. So they didn't really become actual dog soldiers. They just
Mhm.
acted very animalistic.
What?
And I think that's something that when we look at First Nation stuff, we really have to look at all the translations there. We can't just be like, oh, that's a
Yeah.
werewolf. Or, oh, that's a dog.
But
No, we have to look at it all the way down to the root.
so many of the people of them tribes will tell you that some could transform and some could not. So in some aspects, yes, some of them fought like it. Take my ancestors, for instance. You had a group of people, they call them berserkers. Berserkers is a false term. There was
Mhm.
berserkers, there was Ophanars, there was different types. Ophanars was the most feared ones because they was able to keep their minds and strategy. Ophanar, wolf. There's stories of them transforming into a wolf during battle. Then you go to the Celtic side. The Celtic will tell you have these ones that were wolf full time that could walk bipedal. There was also some that could transform into the wolf. So I mean, there's so many cultures that talk about these two different entities
But was it
throughout history.
metaphorical or literal though? You know, because it's kind of
Yeah.
like the Bible. Jason can back me up on this one.
Yeah.
With the Bible, there's always three different points of view to it. You know, there's the metaphorical, the literal, and the religious perspectives.
Mhm.
So when you look at stories like that, you have to kind of apply that rule too. That there's probably three different perspectives to look at.
You can't deny it either because there's
Yeah.
with every
No,
myth
no.
there's a kernel of truth to it. So I mean,
I'm
some
not
of these
saying
things
deny anything.
absolutely, yeah.
I'm not saying deny anything. I'm saying you just got to look at all three perspectives and kind of
Right.
figure out what they really meant.
And that's what I'm trying to explain for people in the chat that may not understand what we're talking about. It's like you can't deny this because they say this because of these. But you're right. You have to look at all aspects because there's a kernel of truth to it all. Problem
Well,
is, we just don't know. We've lost the method. Not all of us, but some of us has lost that method to be able to perform that right, which did the transforming. The only one we know of nowadays is modern times that can still do it, besides voodoo, is the SWs.
Well, when
You
you look at the folklore of werewolves, you've got to
Mhm.
realize that it's altered through
Yeah.
time. Once
Mhm.
Hollywood got involved,
Oh God, yeah.
everything changed. That's where the silver bullet thing came in. Before that, I mean, that was like 1933, 35, somewhere where
Mhm.
the silver bullet came in. Before that, silver bullets were never a part of that. Matter of fact, iron was more likely to be something that would stop it,
Yeah.
which goes back to the Fae. If
Yeah.
you look at werewolf folklore, it required an object for that human to change into a werewolf. Now, the term werewolf simply meant a man who can change into a wolf. There
Mhm.
was none of this in between dogman looking stuff. It
Yeah.
changed completely
Yeah.
into a wolf. And the
Yeah.
only way that you could possibly tell the difference was maybe a human kind of look in the eyes and maybe its behavior, or you would recognize something about this savage wolf that was so much different, so much bigger, so much more aggressive than all of the other wolves that were in the
Mhm.
area. So a
Mhm.
lot of this, where you see the artwork, a lot of people will say, okay, well, if there wasn't these werewolves that were standing up, then why do you see these famous, wood cuttings and pictures of werewolves like the werewolves at the wall? Uh,
That's
what
one
they
good.
were doing, you have to understand artistic interpretation
Yeah.
rather than what was actually taking place. Artistic interpretation, what they would do is they would stand them up so that you
Mhm.
knew it was a werewolf, because it was too difficult to try and explain through one little picture
Mhm.
in artwork that what you were looking at were werewolves rather than wolves. People took that as a literal translation and decided that werewolves all stand up on their hind legs, which was never the way the folklore was
Mhm.
Yeah.
until
Mhm.
We
until
spoke about that, Jake.
Hollywood got involved and got past the man wolf and Lon
Mhm.
Chaney Jr.
Yeah.
and got up into the more horror specific of the Howling and movies like that.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, and this is where again, not understanding being overly literal with art, right?
Yep.
Because we use cameras, right? That's a broader thing. Like when
Mhm.
Ancient Aliens points out, and I'm going somewhere with this, they'll say, "Well, look, here's these manuscripts, and it has these figures that look like they're in these weird spacecraft at the crucifixion." It's like that's the sun and the moon. It's
Right.
called personification. This was a
Hmm.
common art form, right? And it was a way of saying, because what they're doing is they're saying the sun, because the sun was darkened, that happened during the crucifixion. That's part of the story. They were given personifications. Oftentimes they were just put faces on them, right? But sometimes they were depicted as people riding what looks like the sun and then the moon. That was the idea. We over literalize things because we can take photographs of things. So to your point, again, a lot of werewolf stories actually don't even have them transforming into wolves at all. There's one
No.
man who had a magic belt that made him a werewolf, but it didn't change him. He just gained power and started eating people. Right?
That
Right.
was pure Stube, right?
Yeah.
Yep.
I'm terrible with names, but I think you're correct on that
Actually,
one.
a really good case of psychological lycanthropy.
Yeah.
Hmm.
But it
Yeah.
goes back to the again, a lot of the accounts of again the berserker phenomena, right? There are stories of them changing, but then there are other stories where they're not, where it's just
Right.
they would put on the pelts and they would fight ferociously. One of my favorite stories actually about a berserker is I forget the name of the saint. When I think he was in Ireland, and I think may have even been Saint Patrick, but they were showcasing like look how powerful our gods are, because that was the thing is they were channeling, they were allowing possession of their gods to give them that strength, and so this is how
Right.
powerful he is. And they built this fire, and he's like he can walk right through it and be completely unfazed. He goes okay, and he puts up his staff that has the cross on. And he goes walk past the my staff. He couldn't do it, right?
Hmm.
So a lot of this is again the church I went to, I grew up in. My wife has a lot of missionaries. My wife is a missionary family. I've heard stories of people transforming from people who, again, you talk to missionaries who are out in the jungle. They're like, look, we've seen some stuff. They won't talk about it in public. They're like, but they understand that you will talk. They're like, let me tell you let me tell you this happened, right? And yeah, so I have no problem with the idea of people transforming into anything. Now, I will say this: does that mean they're physically changing, or is it that the demon or whatever they're channeling is taking form around them? Right? Is it our perception of them? I don't know.
Yeah.
Again, I ain't got Spookatron 5000. All I know is it looks like they're changing. That's good enough for
Right.
me, right? So it's
Yeah.
like there is some truth to these stories. The problem is we also have this other big question mark of, are we entertaining entities
Mm-hmm.
Are we allowing access to entities that do not have our best interest at heart? And are we endangering ourselves sometimes and other people? Because I worry that that within the realm of cryptozoology, and the book I'm working on will actually go into more detail on this, but I can understand why the early Bigfooters took what we would now call wild man mythology and just said, "Oh, it's all this physical Bigfoot thing, and it's just primitive cultures coming up with these ideas and these stories because of what had happened over the previous century." Right? I get that. The problem is, around World War One, academia rejected a lot of things that it had previously accepted about things like the supernatural. And Age of the Earth kind of stuff. And it's like, okay, and essentially they just said everything's materialistic. It became a purely materialist worldview. And so that early group, everyone's just they're they were even omitting stuff of high strangeness
Mm-hmm.
with a lot of these stories. They're just saying, oh, the person was crazy, or they misunderstood, or it's the adrenaline, or whatever, right? And I think it has set us up to where we are now, whether people realize it or not, interacting with a lot of these things. I do think there's evidence for a physical thing out there that we could call Bigfoot. But I worry that a lot of this other stuff ain't.
Yeah.
And we are interacting, and we are doing the one thing every culture on the planet has said, don't do that. Again, what's the joke? If you're out in Appalachia, if you're walking on a trail and you hear somebody call your name, no, you didn't. You could say that in Japan. You could say that in China. You could say that in Ireland. You could say that in Greece. You could say that in Israel. You could say that in South America. It doesn't matter where you were. Every culture would give you that exact same suggestion. It's like, did you hear your friend calling you out? No, you did not.
No, you didn't. It's like not whistling at night. Not whistling at night is another big one.
Yep, exactly. And it's iron affecting the supernatural is a very common thing. So it's like there are realities to this. My fear is, in our search for the Nobies, we're coming across the paracryptids, and those things have intentions.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think, and I would argue, most of them are not good, because maybe you're a snack, maybe you're a form of entertainment, maybe you're a notch on a belt. I don't know. All I know is they ain't your friends.
No.
Mm-hmm. No, I'd agree.
Well, I'm too sexy to disagree with, sir. So.
And what's funny on the scientific side of it, where you were talking about, these people who saw and experienced these things, they're just making up stories, they're full of it and all that. We're kind of coming full circle, because whenever you look at quantum physics and quantum mechanics, that stuff is really starting to back up a lot of the ideas that our forefathers and everything had. A lot of what the Native Americans said, a lot of what the old cultures from Africa, Japan, the Celtics and everything said about certain things, about wild places, about different energies, different entities, even different realities. It's all starting to pop back in with quantum physics and quantum mechanics coming along. So, you're, I mean, what you said initially about us not understanding reality, you're absolutely right. There's no way we possibly could. If you look at the way that we perceive reality, it's through our five senses. Now, our five senses limit us. They haven't given us the strength to reach out and completely understand reality. They've given us a way of limiting what's going on with reality, so that our minute little brains can comprehend exactly what's going on around us.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean necessarily that what we're seeing, tasting, touching, smelling, experiencing is the truth. It's what we've allowed ourselves to experience.
Yes.
And maybe that's why kids, start off experiencing and seeing ghosts and other things, the thing under the bed, the thing in the closet. And then we kind of grow out of it because we're forced to grow out of it. Maybe they're able to see things that we can't see as adults. We know that kids up to a certain age can hear at a certain pitch that adults can't hear at. Why can't kids also see at a certain spectrum that adults can't see at?
Yeah.
Well, there's a funny thing, and you guys mentioned this earlier. They focus on the children more than anything else, and there's a reason for it. children are more acceptable to it because they're not as brainwashed as us as adults are. So you're hearing these things, you're seeing things like you're talking about. It makes sense why they'll be targeted more than adult, because they're not brainwashed to ignore it, to say, oh, that's just house settling, or whatever the dang excuse is. They're more acceptable because they're more in tune to it. Their brain hasn't been altered from it yet.
They're also easier prey, because when a kid says, oh, I'm talking to my imaginary friend, you just kind of dismiss it. You don't really see anybody go, oh, well, she's got an imaginary friend, I got to look into this. So if a little girl were to say, hey, there's a Bigfoot outside talking to me, we're going to be like, oh, that's so cute. You got such an imagination. We don't look into it. Well, we probably should. It's something that's kind of alarming as we disregard it, and we could be investigating.
Okay, weird, but I think that this is a great example of that. Did y'all ever see the third Transformers movie, Dark of the Moon?
Yes.
Of course.
And Laserbeak transforms into what looks like a little pink version of Bumblebee, and walks up to this little girl playing outside. He goes, is your mommy and daddy home? And then the next thing we see is she's playing with Laserbeak as this friendly looking robot in her room. And then when the father gets home, it's like, oh, good, I'm going to transform into my terror robot, vulture thing, and kill this guy in front of his family. Right? It's the same thing. And if again, children are easy prey, to your point. This is why I think that they would go after them. And again, let me throw another monkey wrench in our spokes here to merge some metaphors. We don't even see anything. As an artist, this is one of the things that as an artist I have to explain to people. You've never seen anything. What is happening, what we call sight, is our brain through the rods and cones of our eyes is receiving information, and your brain is creating it.
Yep.
What you see is an interpretation of reality by your brain based on past experiences. This is why optical illusions work. If you were actually seeing things, you couldn't do things like the Ames window. The Ames window is the greatest illusion you will ever see. I highly recommend looking it up, because essentially what it is, it's a thing that looks like a window in perspective, right? It's just a little cardboard cutout where it's like a rectangle, but looks like it's twisted this way, and it's larger on one end and narrower on the other, and so it looks like a row of windows in perspective. You put a pin or just a rod through it, and you spin it, and it looks like the rod and the window are going two different directions, because you don't actually ever see anything. Your brain is interpreting what the data is being given. We've proven, if you're unfamiliar with something, you don't even see it. There have been sites where people will go to, foreign lands where the fruits and vegetables are completely different. They're walking around, they can't even interpret which stall is selling what, because everything's so weird. Your brain's like, I don't know what I'm doing here. That's why a lot of cases things look human, because your brain is trained to look for the human face. That's a big part of our survival, and understanding and communicating with each other. So when people see things, again, just makes things even harder. You've never actually seen something.
Yeah.
It's like our five senses are that easily tricked. So when you see something for 2 seconds, right? And particularly if you get that adrenaline going, your brain's making up whole stories. It's like, I don't know what I'm doing here, right? Because it's trying to keep you alive. That our 3 pounds of meat and electricity that we call a brain is just there trying to keep you alive.
Yep.
It's like, I'm trying to keep you breathing, eating, and making babies. Let's whatever keeps those three things happening. That's its job. So when you see something that you're completely unfamiliar with, your brain's going to be like, okay, I'm just going to put together everything that I can that will keep you alive.
Yep.
And which is, again, the question I hate the most is when people ask experiencers, well, what do you think the thing wanted? How in the hell is that person supposed to know what that thing was after? You don't even know half the time the people you're meeting why they're there.
Yeah.
That's true.
I mean, outside of the pizza guy delivering your pizza, most of the people, it's like you don't even know why that squirrel's out there, what its intentions are. It may not have intentions. It just may be out for out for a stroll because it's little squirrel wife was gibbering at him and he just wanted to get out of the house. You don't know, right?
Right.
But we interpret things, not just what we see in intentions, but it's like we create those narratives in our own heads. And so it's even worse. It's unless you can actually stop and look at a thing for a long period of time, study it, become familiar with it, you're not even really truly seeing it.
Mhm.
Which just lands into this broader question of are we sure we're seeing what we think we're seeing?
Well, that's like, the color purple. As much as Whoopi Goldberg's not going to like this, the color purple doesn't exist. Violet exists. Purple is just simply your brain saying there's no green there. So, and up until what about 200 years ago, 300 years ago, blue didn't exist. It was never recorded as blue. It was perceived as a different color. It was perceived as a different variance of green.
It's old. Well, it's older than that. But the word blue is the last color to enter into any lexicon that we've discovered.
Right.
Yeah, or often seen as a shade of black or a shade of green. Yeah.
Yes, and part of that we believe has to do with the evolution of our eyes, because more rods and cones have started popping up in our eyes. There's actually scientific proof that maybe our eyes are starting to adjust even more to accept more colors. If you look at the eyes of women as opposed to men, they actually have a tendency to have more rods and cones. That's why women will tell you, hey, go get me, this turquoise Prussian whatever paint. And they, all the women know which color that is. And the guys are going, you mean blue? So.
Well, there is a physical component, but there's also a psychological component to this as well, because
there is.
If you don't have a word for the thing, you don't really, your brain doesn't really catalog it. So it is definitely it's a lot more complicated than we realize. Right. Again, you can even see it in the word blue, right? Specifically blue and black. Black we had a word for, and blue was just a form of black. So there's also a psychological component as well. Again, there is absolutely an eye component to this, and that does seem to be happening, but there's also a psychological component. But to bring your point back, the point that you're reinforcing is our brains are simply interpreting data.
Yeah,
that's coming
absolutely.
And it's a lot more complicated than we think. And so so my fear is we in our desire to catalog everything, we may be talking past each other, right? Like even the pale crawler phenomena. It's like, well, if you call it a pale crawler or if you call it a Slender Man, I mean, we know Slender Man's fake lore, right? But work with me on it. What's really fundamentally the difference, except for the mythologies attached to them? What's the difference between a pale crawler and a Wendigo? What's the difference between a pale crawler, a Wendigo, and a ghoul? Except for the mythology around it.
Exactly.
Right? The narratives that we've
theory on that too. So,
please, I'm jabbering. Let me drink my black.
So my theory is that the pale crawler and the Wendigo are very much really, very, very, very much so. So let's pretend that we're somebody else for a while, that we're an ancient people here, and we're roaming through the woods and we're minding our own business, and we happen across a pale crawler. Okay, this thing reacts to us hostilely. It comes at us. It's aggressive, but it looks like a man. It looks human enough, but it also looks monstrous enough. So we know it's not fully human, but we're going to think at one time it might have been. So if we know of the Wendigo, we're to be like, oh, that's the Wendigo. Maybe that's where the description came from. Because if you put the two, they line up almost perfectly. There's small variances, small differences, but they're almost identical.
Well, just like the ghoul, I mean, the ghoul is described very similar in the same way as well.
Yeah, just different culture.
Yep.
It's like the werewolves and the skinwalkers. Same stories, really, just different descriptions, and there you go.
Same process is used, the same basis behind it is used. It's just called something different when a different culture. And that's something that I've always said for a long time. It's much like Bigfoot. It's much like ghosts. They're the same thing. They're just described differently depending on what culture you're from. And it goes back to what Jason was talking about earlier with the Fae. Fae comes from Celtic mythology. We're common. We know it as Fae because there's a lot of Celts that came here. especially here in the Ozarks. A lot of Germanic and Celtic people came to the Ozarks and the Appalachians. That's why that stuff is there all the time. You know, things in our day-to-day life is based off of Nordic tradition and Celtic tradition. The days of our week, I mean, so much stuff is intertwined in that, and that's why that we call it that name, because that's what we're used to.
Yes.
Yep.
True.
So we did have a question earlier. I know we're going to change the subject here. I'm going to have to, hopefully I can remember, because it was way up there. Freaky had asked, he said he's seen a video of a hat man, and its hat changed shapes. Is that normal? I don't know on that one.
Yeah, I don't know. Sorry, please.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
Please. No.
I don't know that I don't know that you could necessarily take anything about Hatman and box it into one, criteria. I've in my experience, what I experienced is all I can speak from. It was more of a wide-rimmed hat. I always joke that it looked like, I was being followed by the Quaker Oat Man in silhouette.
That might be more terrifying.
But yeah, really, I don't care for oatmeal cookies, so please keep those away. But there have been other instances where people talked about the hat man having more of a stovepipe type hat, or having more of a fedora or something like that. So I don't know. Maybe it's a little bit more cultural again, or it just fits the mold. I don't know that Hatman is one individual or several. So our information is vague. So we're kind of doing the best we can with what we got.
Yeah, I would agree. And again, I think the problem is, at this point, all video evidence is null and void until we have a way of actually, unless somebody shows up and says, "This is my video. Here's the thing I took it on, and here's the metadata to prove it."
Yeah.
Until you have all that, at this point, you should assume everything is AI.
Yeah.
Right. And I do mean it. Again, I don't want to change the subject, but until there's actual evidence proving the authenticity of any video, assume it's faked.
Yes.
But to the question, is it possible that Hatman's hat is changing? To your point, I've got an account of it looking like an older Western style hat, but again, not modern, cowboy hat, but think more tombstone, where it's again wide brimmed, but it's
right.
Again, I think it's not one entity. It may be a
there
class
you
go or a group. There you go. Yeah, but it is again. It takes that our cultural understanding of what a hat is, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it may even be the intention behind. Because let's face it, if you have people who wear a certain hat, will indicate certain things in certain stories, right?
True.
So it could be that again, that person would interpret that hat having a particular meaning or cultural significance to them. So that's why that particular hat may be chosen. Again, the thing's probably not even wearing a hat. It's just that's how we're interpreting it.
Yeah.
Right. That's the form that we're taking.
Yeah. I mean, it's just as terrifying to see some shadow figure that appears to be cloaked like death, or something like that. So yeah, there's all kinds of different shadow figures and interpretations of what these things are and could be.
Yeah, but again, figures in black are as old. Again, it's one of those cultural universals. So
yep,
it's so common.
Yeah, I mean, even paranormal has been known to show up as a blackish figure, even a grayish, a whitish, red, green. They've been known to show up different colors too. But even in the paranormal side of it, you'll have them that when they're trying to manifest will end up being like a dark, shadowy figure. You got them on both aspects.
The Cherokee people, the Sunyayi Adahi, the night goers. They're shadow people that walk around looking just like human shadows, like silhouettes with glowing eyes.
Yeah. Or you get into like the Nalusa Philea, these long shadowy things that are out in the woods. I've actually encountered one of those things before, and it scared the crap out of me. So it's very strange.
Yeah,
indeed.
We have another question here too, and this is from Brandon. It says, "What if colorblind people aren't really colorblind?"
Okay, so I will say this: it's above my pay grade, but but there is a friend of mine who had a form of color blindness that was largely helped with glasses. That actually, I forget how it does it, because there's different kinds of color blindness, right? It's not like people who are, they don't just see things in black and white. There's a lot of different forms of it, but he was able to put on these glasses, and he could actually see the difference between colors, right?
Interesting.
So there is that technology absolutely exists where you can use, where some forms of it can be helped through glasses, right? And you can actually see the colors, at least some spectrums of colors. So there's definitely a physical component to some of it. There may be more of a psychological or even a malformation of the brain that causes it in some cases. Again, this is where it gets above my pay grade, because we think, oh, someone's colorblind, meaning that's what it is. It's like that's really probably a symptom of hundreds of different kinds of things that would cause the experience of color blindness. So, again, even the idea of color blindness itself it's a term that we think we understand what we're saying. We really don't, because not everyone who's colorblind doesn't see colors; they just see it differently, right? It's like,
Well,
it's like why is a tiger orange? How does an orange tiger blend into a green jungle, right?
Well, they're green.
Well, yeah, because the animals that are seeing him they see it as green. Orange comes across as green in their vision, so they blend in perfectly. Yeah, we're one of the few species that can actually see the color spectrum that we have. In fact, I think we may be the only one, but we're one of the few I know for a fact. And it's like, so again, people who are colorblind, it just may not be what we think it is. It's a symptom of something rather than the thing itself.
I've got a son-in-law who is colorblind. He's red-green colorblind.
Yeah.
So I have to do all the wiring in their house. Anyway, what it has to do with primarily is when you get into the eye, you have what we talked about earlier, your rods and your cones. And those rods and cones are subjective to 3 different lights. So you're looking at the blue spectrum, the red spectrum, the yellow spectrum. And together, that blue and that yellow, of course, are going to do your green. And if you have a malformation in any of those, you can cause a certain amount of color blindness, because your eyes are not as receptive to those colors, those wavelengths. So there is a genetic component that goes with that, because men typically are colorblind, and it is almost the rule that women are never colorblind. They can carry the gene, but they don't express the gene. It's generally only expressed in men. It will happen every once in a while, but typically they don't.
Another fun kind of ties into this is, if you look at medieval or earlier paintings or renderings of a rainbow, there's only 3 colors.
Yeah.
And it's the same thing, because people didn't realize that there were these other colors in the rainbow until literally Newton with prisms was able to separate out the light. Now we know, and so when you look at, that's why you see them as, you see more colors. You're like, well, oh, there's all of these colors. That is because your brain knows it's there and is choosing to segregate out those colors because it expects that. So again, to your point, a lot of color blindness is just malformations of rods and cones, but there's other forms that can be brain malformations, things like that. Like it's a broader, again, the color blindness is a symptom of something rather than the thing itself. And I think that's, again, like anything, these conversations are oftentimes, we go through our lives with very low resolution understandings of a thing because you don't really need it functionally, right? Until you run into something where having a higher resolution understanding is important for the situation, right? And I think that's a broader conversation about our culture, and again, human culture in general, is we tend to operate with low resolution ideas of, or concepts and constructions of anything, because you can't have the full resolution of any concept, of every concept rather, bouncing around your head, you're not going to be able to get things done. Again, that doesn't help you keep breathing, eating, and putting out babies, right? Like
Yeah.
sometimes, you know, that 8-bit version is very sufficient for 99% of what you do in a day, right?
Mhm.
And it's very rare that we actually have to have the conversation of, well, do I actually see things, right? And then you're drinking Zimas and you know, in the back of a college parking lot with some stoner trying to figure out, you know, what is the definition of is. And,
Here's
you
a
know,
story behind that. I think, Jason, you're gonna have to tell.
I'm
that
not
story.
telling it.
You know, that's that is very good. We still got 30 minutes unless you guys want to go longer tonight. It don't matter. We don't have any other shows. Well, never mind. Yeah, there is one other show going on tonight, but we can go longer if you want. Something I was wanting to talk about, and this is something else. Earlier backstage we were talking about the differences between paranormal, supernatural, and why people bunch them together, which I think is a big mistake. They shouldn't be bunched together. Another one is aliens and supernatural. I personally don't believe. I believe aliens is something completely different. Supernatural is completely different. That's just my opinion. What do you guys think on that?
Well, I'll throw my cards down on the alien thing.
What does God need with a starship?
Yeah, exactly. I actually quote that in one of my books, and I'm like, let me apologize for quoting the worst of the Star Trek movies. Actually, I kind of liked it. I did a rewatch of all the Star Trek movies, and it's not as bad as I remember it being. But
Was that
way off topic. Anyway, until someone drops a file on our desk and says, here's a list of every experimental aircraft with their profiles, their lights, and the days and times and locations in which they were flown. Here's every instance of every psychological experiment we've ever performed on people, illegal psychological experiment we've ever performed on people, and here's the people we did it to. Here's a list of all of the intelligence assets that were used to infiltrate the UFO movement. And here's who they were and the stories they were told to populate. We can't begin to have an intelligent conversation on the UFO movement.
True.
Because
I agree.
here something Dr. Dean Bertram points out. Before 1980, nobody talked about Roswell as a thing.
Mhm.
Roswell was brought back into public consciousness, and I always forget the names of the people who did it. But one of them, again, I'm terrible with names, but Dean can tell you. He can rattle it off to the top of his head. The primary author of the book that brings Roswell back in 1990 said, "Hey, yeah, I work for the government." Now, what he came up with was, well, I was trying to do this secret sort of double agent thing. So yeah, I helped screw over Benowitz and helped manipulate him, but I was doing it so I could find out the truth about the UFOs. Right?
Are you talking about Bob Lazar?
No. It was not Bob Lazar, but although don't even get me started on Bob Lazar. But my point is, we can't even begin to have a coherent conversation on this until we know how much of the conversation was deliberately created by the United States government. It is very clear from day one they were using it to hide the UFO phenomenon was being used to hide illegal Operation Paperclip operations, right? The Kerry Arnold or the Arnold, I think it was Kenneth Arnold. The Kenneth Arnold. Sorry, I knew Kenny. Anyway, Kenneth Arnold. His sightings was 100% was of two different types of flying wing that the Nazis had been working on. I can show them. This is where, again, as an artist, whenever I lean on my artist, it's because that has never served me wrong, because I know how people see things. He was drawing a Nazi flying wing, very similar to the one you actually see in Indiana Jones, right?
Mhm.
That was a real aircraft. That's one of the things he saw. There was another one. The Canadians made a replica of it called the Aerocar. It's more heel shaped. Those were the two shapes he saw. So my point here is, from day one, the UFO phenomena has been manipulated by the United States government for whatever purposes it found convenient, right? That's beginning to end. So we can't even begin to have that conversation. What I can say, though, and I will say it with 100% certainty, we have hundreds of accounts of people ending abductions by calling on the name of Jesus. And by the way, shadow people and other things that we would associate with poltergeist, 100% connected to a lot of these abductions, to a lot of the abduction phenomena. I have helped people who believe that they were being abducted and visited by UFOs and aliens. They don't seem to like Jesus a lot. So again, I don't know how much of this whole conversation is the government, again, performing MK Ultra experiments on people. I don't know how much of it is just disinformation and manipulation to cover experiment. I don't know. There's no way for us to know this. What I do know is there is absolutely a slice of that pie that is 100% supernatural. And it absolutely responds to Christian exorcism rituals 100% of the time. Now, again, I don't know how big that slice of that pie, preferably pumpkin, is, right? Is it 10%? Is it 20%? Is it 50%? I don't know. I can't know. What I do know, though, is it is there. And there's a lot of themes within those within the abduction experience and contactees that looks very much like the same phenomena 100 years ago. It would have been the Atlanteans, and then before that it would have been the Fae, and then before that it would have been, on and on and on and on and on to the Elohim of and the Bene Elohim of Genesis 6. It's the same story that's been going on and has been there since day one of humanity.
Yep, I agree with you. You can't really talk about what happens in all of the alien stuff without mentioning what has happened with the Fae, what has happened with even gets into angels and demons and everything else and different lore. It depends on which folklore you're looking at. All of it is intertwined. I mean, like I was talking about earlier with Jacques Vallée and Passport to Magonia, he really he was one of the first ones to really dive into that and really look at the parallel that stretches out between all of those. Because just like you were saying, you have the abductions, and then we have the Fae abductions that would happen with children and adults that would happen back in old stories and lore. So yeah, your Jason's right on the mark.
Yep, spot on, dude. I can't add anything more to that.
Yeah.
Oh, come on. Come up with something. Fight me.
I'll play devil's advocate. I'll play devil's advocate because I believe there is UFOs. I believe there is aliens. I don't believe everything that we call UFO and aliens is UFO and aliens. I agree with you. Some of it's supernatural. Some of it's governmental. I agree with you 100%. But there is enough historical evidence of UFOs and aliens, plus what I've seen with my own eyes. Now, have I seen an alien? No, I've seen my fair and share of UFOs. I've been seeing it since I was 9 years old. I've seen it all over this world. And it's the stuff like my very first experience with UFO was when I was 9 in Forsyth, Missouri. I was leaving my grandma and grandpa's house on Christmas Eve. And this was in the 80s. This was back in the early 80s. And I was laying in the back window of the car. Because back then we didn't have to wear seatbelts, and you can actually lay and sleep pretty comfortably in that back window as a kid.
Dude,
done it many a time. Dude,
yes.
we had a Monte Carlo, and I laid in the back window of that Monte Carlo, and I looked up and I seen a row blinking lights, and I said, "Hey, Mom, look, there's Santa." I see Santa. At the time we were living in Rogersville, in a trailer park in Rogersville. And she goes, "Well, you better go to sleep or he's not going to visit you." And I remember laying there in that back of that back window of that Monte Carlo going, "Man, this is freaking cool. He actually exists." Then I watched it turn into a circle. That line went from a straight line to a circle. Then that thing started spinning wicked fast and then shot straight up in the air and disappeared. Wow. That was my very first experience. Now, I've experienced this stuff, a lot of stuff around military bases, and I'll give you that. I think some of that around military bases is absolutely governmental technology.
Yes,
but I've seen them in other places too. We know we've got documentation of them reverse engineering these UFOs with alien critters in it. They've even got it's all out there. I just did a show 2 weeks of shows on them, reading that stuff off.
Well,
the government a meeting on that.
Well, so that's again, this is where it gets really interesting because, like I mentioned, if you've never seen the documentary Mirage Men, I do recommend it.
Mirage Men?
Yeah, Mirage Men. I can never remember the dude's name, but again, it gets into the Benowitz affair and a lot of these others. And again, this is my whole point. When Bob Lazar was telling people to go to the white mailbox to go watch the UFO experiments, right? What did they describe seeing? A light would show up, it would go up, and it would go left, and it would stop, and it would go right, and it would stop, and it would shoot up high, and it would do these weird angles that no aircraft could do, right? I see that every day because there's a Walmart across the highway, and they're doing drone deliveries. The F-22 is 1970s and 80s technology.
Yep.
It's very important that we realize, again, going back to we don't know what we're actually seeing. Like, unless you're familiar with something, you don't even recognize what you're seeing. I don't doubt people are seeing anything. Like, people are seeing things 100%. But the problem is that doesn't mean it ain't the government, and it doesn't mean it's not something supernatural. It just means it's something, again, it's a legitimate UAP. And I think the fact they changed it from UFO to UAP is very telling, because what has the two big themes of all of these congressional hearings is, A, your money's not going where you think it is, and B, the interdimensional thing. I mean, MUFON came out with a documentary just a couple of years ago. It was brand new. And the first 2/3 of it, probably 3/4 of it, is pretty standard fare, right? It's a crash, that we re-engineered everything and blah, blah, blah. Then the last 15 minutes are like, by the way, it's a little weird, but people who have these abduction experiences have the same brain, we're seeing the same brain activities as people who do remote viewing, and it looks like this may be more interdimensional. You're like, whoa, hold up. MUFON, for their entire existence, they hated elements of high strangeness. They would kick you out if you talked about it. Now all of a sudden you're doing a movie about, and then you're including the interdimensional thing at the same time that Congress is now pushing the interdimensional theme. I stress this, I cannot stress this enough. We do not know what information is fake and created by our own government. In fact, the thing that I've been playing with, the idea is because you have Anna Paulina Luna and Tim Burchett and these others talking about all these things that we've heard for years in the UFO movement, right? Because they're reading the FBI files, which we haven't seen yet. Here's the problem. An FBI file is not, hey, here's the facts, here's the truth of everything. It's, here's all the data that's been collected. So if some nut job is, some schizophrenic is calling in because Santa Claus is beating up the Easter Bunny, it goes in the file, right? But that also means government disinformation has been filtered into these files deliberately as fact or as an account, and they're reading it.
Yes.
At this point, there is no reason to think anything that we're actually getting is legitimate at all. Now, could there be extraterrestrials out there somewhere? Sure, maybe. But here's the thing. Is that what we're seeing? And we're still making, the problem is any assumption of yes or no is a conclusion that's derived off of something. The problem is people are seeing things. There's no reason to think that it's not either, again, in fact, let me throw a third one. Government, supernatural, skyfish. We don't know skyfish aren't a thing. Just, they could just, again, like the creature from Nope, right? Like, we don't
sky
know.
jellies.
Yeah, sky jellies. Like, people have talked about weird things like that as long as everything else, right?
Yep.
So it's very possible that there is something else out there. Again, maybe it's actually more physical, that just behaves very weirdly, or again is interdimensional but not even an intelligence. Maybe there's an interdimensional equivalent of a jellyfish that just hops around and does weird things, to catch. Again, maybe it's just trying to catch our attention.
I'd even go out on a limb and say this. One, I'm not necessarily sure I buy into the interdimensional thing that much, especially if your government is pushing the interdimensional thing. I don't think that's the answer. I would lean more toward, and this is me. This is just me. Um, I think these are beings who have been here a long time, way before us.
Mhm.
I think there were civilizations that existed before ours, before we know about, and
Yep.
these maybe, I'll just go way out there. Um, why when we look at dinosaurs, and this is going to sound really weird, when we look at dinosaurs, we believe that dinosaurs were wiped off the planet by an asteroid or a meteor. Okay, well, the problem with that is the science doesn't add up, because when you look at birds, which evolved from dinosaurs, so you can actually call birds dinosaurs. You look at the sharks that
Some of them, yeah.
remained. You look at the crocodilians that remained, and all these others that still stuck around. You get a big loophole in that whole. Well, the Earth was covered in all this ash, and everything froze, and
Yep.
everything died. Well, what if you had a certain type of reptilian or dinosaur that evolved into more human-like, more anthropomorphic? Wouldn't that
Ah,
look a lot like a gray? I think
yeah.
it would.
The
So
dinosaurian theory.
what if they became, you're looking at what, 65 million years of gap in there to, and you look at how much we've accomplished in just a couple hundred years. Well, yeah, there you go. There's your aliens right there. And we know that there's things called USOs that are down under the ocean. We look at Mount Shasta, there appear to be alien craft that disappear into these mountains and everything. Why are we reaching all the way out into space and other dimensions whenever our answer is probably right here on the planet? We call them aliens, but maybe they were the first Earthlings, and they just hung around to watch whatever kind of crap we're trying to pull.
I mean, that would line up. Some of the First Nations tribes talk about the aliens that lived underground and came up from under the earth instead of coming from the sky. So that would definitely add up.
Right,
You
the
know?
Ant-Men. Yeah, the Cherokee talk about coming up
Mhm.
from, with the Ant-Men. They lived with the Ant-Men for a period of
Yes.
time.
For a long time, I've always said there's interdimension or there's interterrestrial and extraterrestrial.
Mhm.
Now, could one of the interterrestrial been an extraterrestrial at one time? Possibly.
Mhm.
I'm not going to say no. Too much of this ancient religions talks about how they they came from the stars, that or their gods came from the stars and created us. That is through multiple historical religions of
Yep.
that being, and it's a very common belief even to this day amongst some of the native people to this day. There's no dispute about that, and I've always said that there is, or not always, for a long time said that there's interterrestrial and extraterrestrial.
Mhm.
Could extraterrestrial or interterrestrial be both? Ones that was here, known as the first beings, possibly yes. Or is there some that had been out there that came here and colonized here? That could be
Yeah,
a
so sorry.
possibility too.
I don't know. The Star Trek geek in me is hoping that there's plenty of civilizations out there that we're going to meet someday.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, good. You'll get this reference.
Nerding out.
I was
I mean, it's
when
kinda
Robert was
cool
talking.
to-
I'm like, oh, we're talking about the Voth now.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, kind of cool to run into some Klingons someday or some Orions. Anybody who watches Star Trek knows what the
Yeah.
Orions are known for, by the way.
Yeah. Yes.
Exactly.
Well, they're going to jack. They're going to jack our spaceship. Is what's going to happen if we run across the Orions. It'll be
Oh, yeah.
fun, but then they're going to jack our spaceship. That's all I'm saying.
I mean, as long as they look like they did in the show, there, Jason, I'm not going to complain.
Yeah.
Space Vikingers.
Uh-huh.
A lot of people don't realize Viking actually means pirate. That wasn't what they were. It was just if you went out pirating, you were a Vikinger. Let's go out and go Vikinging. Let's go out and pirate people. Yeah, space Vikingers.
You brought up dinosaurs, so there's that theory that dinosaurs never existed. What do you guys make of that?
No. Oh, okay.
No.
So this is where I'll break from everyone else. I think they existed, but I'm a young Earth creationist, but I'm flexible as to what the word "young" means. Because we have, again, this goes back to, well, what can we actually, going back to the alien thing, it's like, well, we know the United States government has been manipulating on us, and I've got hundreds of accounts from other people and personal accounts of ending abductions with exorcisms. So that's why I'm like, those seem to be the most plausible of both, for the phenomena. Same thing with the dinosaurs were real.
Mm-hmm.
The question then becomes, why do we find why do we still find C14 in the soft tissue that has survived? Why is there soft tissue to begin with at all if we're talking about 65 or 120 million years in some of these cases? Because not all dinosaurs didn't, the millions of years theory doesn't have them all existing at the same time, right?
Right.
But we've got
Right.
Triceratops horn that has soft tissue in it. That's a problem because it's 100 and something million years old, 120 million years old, supposedly. Why do we have C14 in diamond? Why do we have C14 in coal? For people who don't know, when you do carbon dating, right, you're measuring so C12, carbon 12, is a stable element. It won't move. But when it's in the upper atmosphere, it is bombarded with cosmic rays like the Fantastic Four, becomes C14. It gets those 2 extra electrons. That is, however, unstable and degrades over time. We have a half-life. That's how we can measure things.
Yeah.
Even if you were to increase the decay rate, which we know and we've tested, even if you double it, increase however far you get, the most you're ever going to be, you really can't get more than 50,000 years, period, end of story. But if I were to be remarkably generous, the most you're getting is 1 million. And that's the same thing with biological tissue. We can test the decay rate of biological tissue. We know what the half-life is of any organic material. Again, anything older than 5,000 years is getting really sketchy, but 50 is about as far as you go. I'm going to be stupidly generous to give you 1 million. Where are you getting the other 64 or 119 million years for that? My other problem is fossilization is really just mineralization, and the only process we know that can do it is water, with highly mineralized water.
The Great Flood.
Got a better explanation for it? Because what we have are, I mean, look up fish eating fish fossils. It is a again, my favorite fossil in the world, fish, right? Because it's pretty. But they are exactly, they're like, you have whole schools of fish. It's like someone just went and said, you're fossils now, right? We have fish eating other fish. We have that fossilized. We have marine reptiles giving birth to live young. That's how we know they did.
Yep.
That is evidence, that's prima facie evidence of a sudden, violent activity that is killing and burying these things and then causing rapid mineralization. Same thing with dinosaur bones. If something dies in the world today, anytime, right? Its bones are gone in a month, right? In a few weeks. Usually they've been consumed by other critters, right?
Right.
So for us to have nearly complete skeletons of these things, what's happened is they were killed and buried and mineralized in the same event that killed them. This is a far more likely explanation for all of this is that you have any worldwide event that occurs that causes the death and burial and the mineralization of these animals. And that's what we're finding. What we're finding isn't ages. We're finding ecosystems that were buried. And this is why you have polystrate fossils, where you have all over the world, all of these layers that are supposed to indicate tens of thousands of years, and yet you have fossils like tree trunks that go run through all of them, and there's no weathering. These are fossilized tree stumps, and they show no signs of erosion on them, like if they had been there and buried over time. The things that we can actually look at and test do not indicate millions of years. They indicate thousands. Again, I'm going to be agnostic as to how many thousands are, but we're not being the idea of uniformitarian geology doesn't hold up. And by the way, this isn't just my conclusion. This is mainstream geology is talking about this, like, hey, this doesn't work anymore. Mainstream biology is not accepting Darwinian evolution anymore either, because it doesn't work. They're rejecting it too. So were dinosaurs real? 100% they were real. People still see them. I saw one.
My local Bimbe.
Yeah. And it's like, dragons. There's theological and mythological dragons, but there are these accounts of like, hey, we just saw this weird thing, right? My favorite one is the cockatrix as a dragon, right? It's like it's the weirdest thing. It's like, oh, it's a dragon that has the head and upper body of a chicken. Okay,
Yeah.
how would you describe? How would someone from, say, Persia 2,000 years ago describe something like an oviraptor?
Mm-hmm.
Very true.
Right?
Yeah.
Like they're just gonna be like, oh, this is what I saw. Like again, this is a 2-hour-long conversation, and ain't nobody got time for that. But again, what I saw was a living ramfractoid pterosaur. I can use art to show that people have encountered these things for hundreds of years. We would have called them a wyvern in the Middle Ages.
Yep.
It's the simple fact of the matter is, if they were 100% real, their fossils are real. I just think that the fossils are indicative of something that we're not that mainstream science doesn't want to talk about because it upsets their apple cart.
Yeah. Well, we also got to take in consideration the word dinosaur is coined in 1864 by a newspaper. So I mean that's where the term dinosaur comes from. Before then, they were known as dragons. There is ancient. You were talking about buried in sediment. Pretty much 99% of old religions up to modern will talk about a flood event. I'm not a mud flood guy. I believe what they consider mud flood is a sediment that receded after the Great Flood, which buried everything, which would cause fossilization. But if you actually look at stuff, not only do we still have current sightings of dinosaurs, Mesoamerica has carvings on their pyramids of them working with dinosaurs, We also have creek beds that's being rediscovered every single day with human and dinosaur footprints side by side. You can't sit there and go, hey, that was fossilized and then liquefied and became fossilized again. That's how you get, no. They walk side by side. Then it got fossilized. I mean, that's just how it is. So I'm a firm believer. I agree with you. I never in my whole life have ever believed that the asteroid destroyed all of them. We have too many things to the state that's still alive that was alive back then. You have the spoonbill fish. You have the alligator gar. The list goes on. Sharks, giraffes, horses, elephants. I mean, the list goes on of different animals that was alive during that time frame that's still alive now.
Yep.
Roxanne, yes, I did say wyvern.
Yeah, wyvern.
Wyvern. But here's the other. Darn it! I just lost what I was going to say. Oh, birds. Alongside that, we find true birds in fossil layers lower than they're what they're supposed to be.
Mm-hmm.
We find mammal fossils in the same layer as dinosaur bones, and that's not me. That is mainstream paleontology talking about it, but they do whisper about it because they know it will upset the apple cart if they talk about it too. People ask me, it's like, do you think that underneath that there's all this information underneath the Vatican? No, the largest trove of actual information that's being hidden from you is behind a paywall, where archaeologists and paleontologists and everyone and all these scientists are having these conversations about the crap that they're finding. You can go and look up these conversations that people who do radiocarbon dating are having about the fact that they're finding C14 in coal and diamonds. And they're like, this ain't supposed to be here. This is a problem. And they're having those conversations, but you got to go by the journal, right? So it along the idea of the trackways, right? The trackways themselves are evidence of a catastrophic event. Have you, when you're walking around your house and on a muddy day and you leave footprints in the mud, does that ever turn to rock? No. Every time it rains, it gets washed away. Or even when it dries, we can tell a lot of things about these dinosaurs and about all the things, all these trackways. That means they were mud that had dried a little bit, and then something occurred to turn them into rock before they had a chance to have those trackways eroded.
Okay, so what do you think? What do you think happened then? What do you think happened that caused all of these weird, anomalous things to have happened in our geological history?
Big question.
It's called the flood. It's the deluge. Again, it says the fountains of the deep open.
So you're talking about the biblical flood?
Yeah, 100%. God was like, we need to put a stop to what's going on right now. We're gonna hit the hard reset like you would on a laptop, And what we're seeing is evidence of that. Imagine for a second that there was a library, okay, that was
Mhm.
locked, right? And we all walk into the library and there are books all over the place, right?
Mhm.
And we say, okay, we need to discuss how these books got where they were because they were put up when we left yesterday and now they're all over the place. But we can't consider someone coming in and moving the books. That's the conversation we're having with geology and really everything right now. There is the presupposition that certain things did not occur, or you have to have a certain amount of time. There is a rejection of even the concept of things like intelligent design or the flood. Anything that's not uniformitarian geology, again, that was if you came up with anything that was catastrophic, they rejected it outright, even if it was the best example. Now, let's go back to the library. If we look at the books and it's like, well, not just all over the floor, we see them stacked and grouped by authors or by concepts, and we see some open to certain passages that would connect to another thing. We would say someone came in here and started reading and collecting these books for a reason. But if you start with the premise that nobody came into the room, then you have to find some other way to explain this. The weirdness that we're seeing, it's only weird if there wasn't a massive geological upheaval that reshaped the planet, that killed these things. If we were to take the biblical story seriously, not necessarily super literally, the way that, because the problem is, even with that, that's us reading into the text, right? But let's just take it seriously. What is the story and the narrative being told? There was a world that was optimal for life, where things lived significantly longer. At least humans did. But there was an optimal environment that was disrupted by a catastrophic event. Everything that survived is moving into a less optimal environment and was collected in a very small edition. Now, I think there's, again, we'll talk about the fine points here, but these are the broad concepts. What would you expect to see as evidence if that story were true? We would find much larger, much more robust creatures living in the past. We would also see greater diversity of life forms. We find that. We would see evidence of cataclysmic events. I've already spent a lot of time talking about the fossils, the fact that these things had to be buried and killed, or were killed in the same event that fossilizes them. It changes everything. Everything that lives and breathes today, we can find fossils of them previously, and they're all smaller, much shorter lived examples of what came before. My favorite thing in the world. I live in Texas, right? Armadillos, right? The glyptodon is my favorite thing. It is an armadillo the size of a Volkswagen Beetle. Imagine hitting that thing with your car.
Mm-hmm.
You're totaling it. Like, it goes from being a speed bump to a wall, right? So the simple fact of the matter is, that is the story that we're seeing, that we have the life forms today are far less diverse. In fact, if you were to go back to, the problem is people are like, well, how do we have lions and tigers and jaguars and kitty cats? And it's like, you don't have to. The Hebrew word for kind is min, or min. I don't speak Hebrew. I barely speak English. And the word, it doesn't mean species. It's more the concept of a bloodline, of descent. You could get away with about 1,000, because you don't have to bring all the insects on. You certainly don't have to bring any fish or marine reptiles or marine mammals. You just have to bring land-breathing critters. You could get away with about 1,000 different animals and still have the populations that we have today. Because there's really a very small number of animal families that even exist on this planet. Our Earth used to be far more diverse than it was. And I think it's 80% of all domesticated animals come from the Middle East.
True.
Mm-hmm.
So I just, if you take the story and the fact that everyone has a similar story, you take that as evidence, I think that fits the data better. What we can actually test better, what actually holds up to examination better, is that story, is that narrative. And there's, again, hundreds of other touch points. It's not just, I think one of the big problems we also have in cryptozoology and paranormal research and all of it is we put it in isolation. Instead of saying, well, hold on, where does this fit in the broader world that we're living in that we can actually test, that we can poke with a stick, right? Not that I think we often get lost in our theories instead of saying, well, hold on, what can I actually poke with a stick? What can I show? What can I prove objectively? And let's stick to that first. I think what we can actually poke with sticks shows that story is much more closely aligned with reality than the story that we're being told, that is popularly projected in government schools. That particular narrative was wasn't even the wasn't even the mainstream prior to World War I. You could find academics who are like, yeah, there was a flood. That's how you explain erratics, these giant boulders in the middle of fields in Britain. There's all kinds of things where you have the uniformitarian geology came in around the turn of the century and became the dominant paradigm after World War I, because it had and I would argue for philosophical reasons, it was, if humanity is an accident, then you have no problem turning humans into chattel property. So I think there was a political ambition behind it. That's why it was accepted. The problem is it doesn't hold up to what you can actually poke with a stick. I'll let you go back. Sorry, I've monopolized the time.
Let me ask this. So you're saying that all of the fossils that we're looking at then occurred because of this one event?
I would say at least most of them. There are definitely fossils that could have been created later in other events and other tectonic events, but it's, again, maybe mastodons and things like that. But when we're talking about dinosaurs, we're talking, that's the layer that we're talking about. We're talking about these.
Well, I'm kind of talking about all the layers, because if you get into all the different stratas, then you have different fossils that occur in different time periods and different strata.
You got to consider. Look how many times we have a. You got to consider.
Let Robert talk. I want to hear.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, I've monopolized time. I want him to form his argument.
So I mean, you have these things that are happening in different strata, different layers. So you have fossils that come from the Precambrian area. You have fossils that come from much earlier eras and later eras. And yeah, you're absolutely right. Water is essential for fossils, but that's because there were seas where seas no longer exist. There were swamps where swamps no longer exist. There was all of these different sediments. So it's where the sediment, you were absolutely right, where sediment washes in and it replaces soft tissue and bone. But I don't think that requires there to be one global event that happened whenever there's the easiest answer is there were several events that have occurred. You can have landslides, you can have floods in this area that may have happened, or you could have different wildfires, events, things that happen that snuff out life automatically. We've seen it. We know that certain areas where there were fossils that occurred on, when you look on the West Coast, it happened because there were landslides that had happened, and it absolutely covered a whole thing of fish at one time, and it made a large area of fossilization. So I don't agree with your argument. I mean, respectfully, I don't agree with your argument because I don't think that you have to have one event that answers absolutely everything. And again, when it's so clear that there were so many different events that happened, and there was a wide spectrum of different animals that occurred. If you look at the population of animals on the planet, 99% of the animals that have been on the planet are extinct now.
Yep.
So, I mean, I have a hard time buying into that.
Well, so again, as I said, there are probably other events that caused later fossilization in more recent time. The problem is we're talking about all the layers. Here's the problem: the idea that the further down you dig, the older the fossils become. Right?
In theory, it should be, but you will have anomalies.
Right. The problem is, though, the anomalies outweigh the model. Again, we have found true birds in fossil layers that were dated to be older than they should have been. But according to the modern idea, we should not find birds that far down in the strata. It's not just the strata; it's the broader layer. It's like, well, we found this type of a dinosaur here, but we're still finding true birds, and we're finding mammals. We're finding these things in the same strata. So the problem is, this isn't something where there was a landslide that there was some sort of liquefaction of the soil and it just moved over. They're in the same strata, and there shouldn't be there. The anomalies outweigh the model at this point, which is why even mainstream paleontologists are saying we don't know how this is working. Again, it's in the journals that you have to buy, because they're not having this. Michio Kaku does not want to have this conversation online, right?
Yeah,
and he's not going to have it on ABC. There is Tartaria land. I mean this metaphorically, where there's the nut job that's running around saying there were giants with flying space cars in 1860, and there was a flood, and then everyone came around and said we're all going to lie about all of human history, and we're going to take their technology, right? I'm not talking about there are PhDs in who are working at major universities who are saying, hey, this isn't working. These models do not line up with what we actually see in the field. They will, again, the conversations are had behind not closed doors, but the doors that people who are in the lane, that are in the layman, do not hear.
Right. Yeah, absolutely.
So I understand your point, and that is but it goes back to the locked library metaphor. If the assumption is no one came in, then you have to find a way to explain why the books were there without a person coming in. People who say no, there's evidence that a person came in, can make those arguments. Now, you don't have to buy the argument. However, I would argue the totality of the argument makes way more sense. Again, polystrate fossils, where you have dozens of layers that are supposed to indicate tens of thousands of years, and yet those tree trunks show zero weathering. The fact that there is soft tissue at all.
No, I'll agree with that.
That's prima facie evidence that these things were not fossilized millions of years ago. Now, was it 6,000? Was it 4,000 years ago? 6,000 years ago? 15,000 years ago? I don't know. Not my bailiwick. I don't have to have an opinion on that. But it is thousands.
I would have to ask this: where is that tissue? Where was it found? Was it found in an Arctic area? Was it found in a subarctic area? Are we looking at something that popped up in the middle of a desert? If it popped up in the middle of a desert and we got soft tissue, then the argument's valid. But if we're looking at soft tissue that popped up in the middle of the Arctic, where it's been tundra and permafrost for the past 15, 20,000 years or better, then the argument's completely different. Because now you're talking about something that's been frozen rather than setting simply with a fossil. There's a difference between tissue that's been frozen and fossilized.
Yes, so, this is 100% true. However, Utah has not been buried under permafrost for the last 20,000 years.
You're right. It absolutely hasn't.
And but even the problem with that is, even if you were to freeze soft tissue, right? You're not getting it. It's not staying around for a million years.
Theoretically, it shouldn't. No.
Yeah, no, it's not theoretically. Well, again, it's not theoretically. According to every test we can run as to what allows, as to what because even soft tissue we're all radioactive, right? Even soft tissue has a half-life. The most, again, I will be the single most generous human being who has ever existed. I'll give you 1,000,000 years on all of it. Where are you getting the other 64 or 119 in the case of the Triceratops that came out of Utah? And the problem is, yeah, you're right. Let's say it was an Arctic area. Well, that's great, but that Arctic area was only Arctic for the last 20,000 years, covered in permafrost. It wasn't covered in permafrost supposedly 30 million years ago. It certainly wasn't covered in permafrost 60 million years ago, supposedly, when it was fossilized. Yes. And again, here's my problem with the even the permafrost thing. Mastodons. They have, when they were the mastodons that we found frozen have summer grasses in their mouths.
Yes.
and in their stomachs. That is rapid freezing.
Mm-hmm.
Again, that's another catastrophic event. I'm open to the idea there were multiple catastrophic events throughout history,
Mm-hmm.
and that maybe even took form many other ways. We just have one that's overly documented by every culture on the planet, but we may actually have multiple events, right?
Right.
The problem is the guys from Birdseye. It happened tonight. Someone actually went to the people who freeze peas and all that,
Yes.
and they're like, "Hey, what would it take to do this to a mammoth?" They asked straight up, "How do you freeze something this big?" And those people are the experts on freezing, on flash freezing anything. They're like, we
right.
couldn't begin to explain because they're talking about winds over 200 miles an hour, a temperature drop. They're like, we can't explain how that could be possible. They're like, we would have trouble flash freezing something that large. But again, whatever event turned the Arctic into a tundra is what killed those creatures and froze them, and they had to remain frozen from that point on.
Mm-hmm.
Otherwise, if there were summers, it's like, oh, they all died. Okay, well, that's sad. We got I like elephants. Elephants are cool. Snuffleupagus was awesome, right? But whatever killed Snuffy had to also keep him frozen for the last 20,000 years, right? Otherwise, the skin would decay and the grass would decay, and we'd just be left with frozen bones. I agree, we'd only have frozen bones, but again, the soft tissue would not have frozen. But again, that's a problem. It's not as big a problem as a 120 million year old Triceratops skull that's found in Utah, or it may be Nevada. It's the same place. Let's be honest. One just has Mormons, the other one has gambling, but has soft, that has soft tissue in it. That's a much larger problem.
I would agree.
Again, I just go back to whatever we can poke with a stick. The mainstream story that we were told by the government isn't holding up, and it's not just people who think that we couldn't cut rocks with saws 100 years ago. Jeez, don't even get me started on that. Those people are nuts. Yeah. Respectfully, you've lost your mind. If you're I'm not talking about Tartaria level nut jobs. I'm talking about actual PhDs who are experts in the field are saying, hey, this doesn't work anymore. It doesn't work with the evidence that we have. It's not consistent. The Delk print, which is one of the things that Eric talked about. Sorry, I just see ED, and so I'm like, is it Ed? I know it's Eric. The Delk print has been CAT scanned. I've seen the CAT scans. That's not a fake print. Where you have a human print and then you have a three-toed, I think it's an archosaur, whatever, step over it. They've done that. Those prints happened at the same time.
Right.
They had to have. And again, ain't nobody's footprints in the mud after a bad rainstorm fossilizing today. So whatever caused that to fossilize had to happen right after those footprints were made. At least within a couple of days, right? There couldn't have been any. And again, if it's really hot, it's going to crack and not be usable anyway. So again, I would suggest that the most rational explanation for why we find dinosaur trackways and dinosaur bones, and then the anomalies, is that there was an event that caused that ground to turn to rock, right? To properly mineralize. Is the same thing that kills the animals that mineralizes the bones. The fact that we have the anomalies themselves are indications that our theory doesn't work. That the modern government purported theory doesn't hold up under scrutiny. Not because a bunch of Tartaria thinking, tinfoil
flat earthers.
Flat earthers. God, don't even get me started on that. It's not the flat Earth crowd that's having the problem with it. It's the people who are saying, hey, it's the PhDs who are having the trouble with it because it doesn't work anymore. So sorry.
No, I'll agree with that.
I've monopolized.
I'll agree to what you're saying, that there are definitely anomalies, there are strange things that happen, and that we do need to look at our structure as far as our models go. We need to reevaluate a lot of that stuff. But that's the wonderful thing about science, is that science is an ever-changing thing. It evolves. Science is a process.
Yes,
The problem,
100%.
most of the problems with science is not science; it's the scientists.
Yes,
It's the ones who have gotten
100%.
their PhDs and they've written the books and they've put out all their fortune and everything
Mhm.
into what they had to say, and that they have to
Yeah.
back that up. And any change that pops up in there, they're going to fight it tooth and nail because they built their entire career around what they said and what they wrote their books about. So,
Yeah.
like I said, that's the wonderful thing about science is it's ever changing. It's a process of learning and doing different things. So, yeah,
Yep.
I'm with you on that, but
Yep.
I'm hesitant to say this one event out of this one group story, or and I know that all over the world there are
Yeah.
stories of
No, I
floods
understand
and
what you're
stuff like
saying.
that.
Yeah.
But and I do not mean this in an offensive way, what I'm about to say.
Please. I'm
I
hard to
don't
offend.
well, no, and I know a lot of people get really offended when I say this. I have a hard time picking one mythology over the next mythology as far as what's the truth
Yeah.
and stuff. I go where
Mhm.
the evidence leads me. That's why I'm a scientist.
Mhm.
Where the evidence leads me, if it leads me to the biblical answer, I'm fine with that. If it leads me to the Germanic answer or the runic answer or
Mhm.
the Old Norse answers, I'm fine with that. If it leads me to whatever the Egyptian answer, I'm fine with that. It's just I want to be careful that we're not following bias to prove
Right.
bias.
Yeah. No.
Yeah.
I think it's I want Ryan to chime in here in a little bit because he's been awfully quiet, and when Ryan's quiet, something bad's about to happen. Um, which is that again, why I would choose the biblical story is again that's a 3-hour conversation unto itself, right? What where I will come back to, and again, goes back to the what we said about the UFOs. Until someone puts a stack of papers on our desk and says, "Here's how the United States government has completely, here's how we've manipulated you. Here's all the things, and here's all the things that we've hit." It's like until we have that, we can't really have a coherent conversation about the UFO phenomena. We
I
really can't.
agree.
In the same way, until until we can until we can put all the cards on the table and say, here's all of the things that we've actually found, here's the stuff we didn't want to talk about, here's here's the papers that were designed to avoid this, here's, by the way, all the people who've paid to have certain things published, because that's a huge scandal right now is we have paper mills going on, and we have all these peer reviewed papers coming out that aren't being peer reviewed at all, and that's across the board and everybody, because everyone's got to publish in order to get your grants, right? Well, until we know which government agencies were paying for particular grants for certain things, because let's face it, anyone who tells you that scientists are above being bribed or being paid to have is a nut. It's like you're crazier than the flat earthers at that point.
Yeah.
But so
Ever heard of COVID?
yeah, yeah,
Ooh, he
Yeah.
brought up the C word. Wow.
yeah,
I
he
did.
Yep.
You rebel, you.
Yeah. Here, let me be even more rebellious. If you don't understand what they did with Alzheimer's research,
Yep.
if when you understand what they did with Alzheimer's research for the last 20 or 30 years, and the same thing with SSRIs, we should have pitchforks and torches at a lot
Yep.
and on a lot of campuses right now. But that's a whole other
Yep.
whole other conversation. My whole point is, again, 3-hour conversation as to why I picked that narrative over the other, however, over the others. But I do find that narrative far more consistent with what we can actually see with when not just fossils or archaeology or paleontology, but all of it, including why do people have accounts of creatures today that match what we find in the fossil record that aren't supposed to be here?
I agree.
Like, and
I
so
agree.
I'm like, when it's the totality that I'm like, this matches what I'm seeing in this book, including what we're seeing right now with exorcisms, with again, what's a big part of the UFO phenomena, the truly exotic part of the UFO phenomena is crossbreeding. Well, that's Genesis 6, right? We're seeing a lot of it's. I always laugh that my specialty is at the beginning of the book and the end of the book, because the middle of the book is where we live.
Yep.
That's where that's where we're all at, and that's the part that actually matters. But if the beginning of the book is true and the end of the book is true, then the middle of the book we should probably pay attention to, and that's why I'm here. Believe me, I would rather be drawing comics right now.
Yeah.
Not that you find people aren't wonderful people, but just like if I had my druthers, I'd rather be doing comics right now. Like that's what I would really like to do with my life, and I'm working on it. I've got books and comics I'm working on, but it's like I'm here because I do think this matters. The shape of the world, metaphorically speaking, it's round, people. It's round. Just go with it.
Yeah.
Yeah. But metaphorically, the shape of the world matters, right? Because if we're not cosmic accidents hurling through space, if we are divine, if we are ourselves divine creatures that are interacting with other divine entities, then every person you've ever met is of supreme importance.
Absolutely.
All of them. That's why I would suggest these entities are screwing with us, because we are of divine import. That's why they want you. That's why they're trying to lead us, to give them access to screw with you. And I have built a rather large list of people who believed they were interacting with a Bigfoot, and they were talking to it, and they were leaving gifts, and and things went very badly for them, physiologically, psychologically. Their lives were ruined by it.
Mm-hmm.
I think that this conversation matters because we've over a century ago we rejected a lot of the ancient ideas of we decided to go purely materialistic. Even the churches went largely materialistic, where God in theology was more again, it was all theological, it was metaphorical, it was psychological. Sure, there was a real God, there was a real Jesus, but everything else, there's just it's all meat and pulleys and puppets, right?
Yeah.
And the simple fact of the matter is, I think people have been hurt by it.
Yeah.
I think there are people whose lives have been destroyed, whose families have been destroyed because we didn't do very simple things that every culture on the planet said, hey, don't do that. That's a bad idea.
Yep.
And we still
I
did
agree.
it.
And we still did it.
Yep.
So that's why I'm here. That's the A and Z's of me, right? I'm here because I think this stuff does matter. And again, I've picked the side that I've picked because I think it matches what we actually see, both in the past and in the present.
Mm-hmm.
And because I'm super awesome and super sexy. I mean, I can't possibly be wrong, right?
You are.
No
Jason,
one this
you are.
beautiful can be wrong.
Yeah. I don't care what
brought up
anybody
that
says.
dino
I'm on your side about
conversation
that.
on purpose. Yeah, I brought up that dino conversation completely on purpose, dude, because I knew that Jason and Prevo would have some good conversation with that. That was done intentionally. That was me provoking. So
Yeah. Ryan's over here like, hold on. He's literally the Michael Jackson meme or GIF with the popcorn. He's like, I'm going to push this button and sit back.
Yeah. Well, guys, hey, I hate to be this guy. I've got to get up early. My wife's got to get up early. I had a ball. Jason, I love debating with you and talking with you. Ryan, I love you to death, buddy. And thank you so much, Edie, for having me on.
Yeah.
I enjoyed it. Hopefully one day we'll do it again, but I've got to get out of here. Unfortunately, I've got
go
work
on,
tomorrow.
get.
So y'all have a great night.
You too, man. Be safe out there.
Bye, Prevo.
All right, y'all too. Bye.
I'll talk to you later, brother.
All right.
So, yeah, I find that kind of interesting because I agree. Not every bit of the fossilization was done by a flood. I do believe a majority of it. And there's several factors that play into this. We have floods, multiple floods every single year. On top of that, recently drained swampland or wetland period, if there's any type of earthquake activity in there, it's called liquefaction of the soil, which things sink. Quicksand is another example of it. So if you get something that's out there during an earthquake on a freshly drained swamp area, there's still water under that soil. When the earthquake shakes, it brings that water back up, which causes liquefaction of soil. If something's on it, it's going to go down in there. I mean, so multiple reasons like that is why you can find these modern fossilizations. And it's already proven multiple times that carbonation dating is extremely inaccurate, like greatly inaccurate. And I was...
They're both on the right track. I think both he and Robert were definitely onto something there.
Yep. And that's why I kind of agree with both of them on that, because there is plenty of proof to suggest that both of these are correct. one of the most ancient religions out there is ancient Sumerian. Even they talk about the flood. Ancient Sumerian in the Old Testament is identical. Words may be a little different, but it's identical, and there's a reason for that. The Hebrews came out of ancient Samaria. So there'd be a standard reason why the Old Testament is the same ancient Sumerian. So if you got the exact same stories in ancient Samaria that you're having in the Hebrew in Judaism, I mean, it's no point. I mean, they all talk about this thing, and I've posed this theory to people before. When we're looking at the Anunnaki are quite described as angel looking. If you actually look at them, they have wings, they have all this other stuff, they have these powers. Then you got Hebrews that come in and say, hey, these are angels. People forget that, in the original text, it says, I am the God amongst all gods. Okay. It means there's more than one. Is he talking about angels? Is he talking about other gods? 10 of one, half dozen the other, tomato. It's really how you perceive it on that, I think, because I believe there's different types of gods. Until the fall of the Tower of Babel, we spoke the same, believed the same, worshiped the same, and looked the same. It wasn't until the fall of the Tower of Babel that God split the man and split the tongue. So that's why if you actually study the core value of every single religion, it's the same. So when you get to talk about these supernatural entities and why they're familiar here and here and here and here and here, it could come back to that reason right there, or it could be just these things. I mean, it's hard to say. We just call them different names.
Maybe it's a Star Trek thing there, where it's numerous gods, but it's one being behind all those different faces. Different names, different faces, but one God.
Yeah.
I would really, really recommend Michael Heiser's work on this. He's excellent. Unfortunately, he recently passed.
Mm-hmm.
He was a Semiticist, so he actually reads those languages, right?
Mm-hmm.
One of the things he's pointed out is that particularly talking about the Old Testament, the word Elohim that we translate as God, it's plural. The word itself is plural, and so the thing is, angels are Benai Elohim. It's sons of God. However, when it talks about gods, also Samuel, when his spirit is called up by the witch of Endor, his spirit is referred to as an Elohim. He's an Elohim at that point. Elohim a better rendition would be spirit. And so it's that there are essentially saying that's the side of the veil you belong on would be sort of a modern interpretation. And that the Elohim that is Jehovah is his grammar, because again, this is one of those things where it's the grammar that matters on that. Is that the grammar is singular. So yes, Jehovah is a Elohim, but not all Elohim are Jehovah, right? It's like they are spirits. He's the spirit. The Plains Indians had the concept of the great spirit, right? There's like the one that everything else is coming out of. It's very much the same idea. Don't give me. And there's the whole conversation to be had about the Cherokee name for the Great Spirit. That's a long conversation, but it's because the Mormons really love that one. But it's one of those things where the Hebrew term is God, but it's like what he's saying is, hey, again, Tower of Babel. He assigns divine beings to rule over humanity because he's like, fine, y'all don't want to be with me. I'll divorce you. But I got a plan. I'm going to fix all this. So it's not that he's saying that they are co-equal to him, but rather that they are also spirits like him, but that no other one is necessarily like he's the spirit. Everything else are these diminutive. Again, the problem is we use the term angel as if it's a species, and angel is actually a job, right? It would be like suggesting the pizza delivery guy is a different species than of being than the guy who picks up your trash or from you, right? It's a job. And that's again, Ecology of Souls by Joshua Cutchins is a great thing. I think the problem is we're trying to assume everything's one thing, and what we have is an ecosystem of supernatural entities, all of them with different jobs and authorities and their own agendas, etc. There is, but again, one God, one creator that views us as supremely important, but not everyone that's underneath him agrees with that. And again, which goes back to the broader conversation today, is what are we seeing when we're seeing Dogman? Right? What are we seeing when we have a Bigfoot that's like, howdy, and then pieces out, but wants to talk to you telepathically, right? Right. It's like, again, it goes back to there may, again, the one phenomena may be sufficient. This is where like Dr. Dean Bertram and I will have a bit of an argument. I think science can take us to the point that says there is a phenomena. And for me, that's sufficient. Again, no Spookatron 5000, right? But it's sufficient to say there is a phenomena rather than being able to necessarily know what that phenomena is. It's like, well, that's out of our realm. We can't poke it with, there's no science stick to poke it with. Then cool, we just need to say that. But recognize that it is there and actually put it back into our models, because if your model doesn't include it, then your model is by definition wrong.
Yes.
And I think people have absolutely been hurt by it. I think that people are dead because of it. I think families have been destroyed, lives, and until we can actually have an honest conversation. My thing is, I just want to put everything on the table to have an honest conversation about it. I think the problem is we're putting a lot of things in one box that we're labeling Bigfoot. We're putting and then we're also not putting everything on the table when we're talking about some of these other things, and we're trying to do them in isolation, not realizing this whole thing's one big tapestry. You pull on any one thread, you're affecting the rest of them. And that holds back our conversation.
We're all part of the great circle. What one of us does affects everything else, and that's flesh and blood. That's spirit form, that supernatural form. Whatever we do or they do sends out a ripple that affects everyone, and we forget about that quite often. And it's something that I talk about in the paranormal field quite often. Is people look at these things and they see ghosts. They're not ghosts. They're still human. They're just not flesh and blood human no more. And, people's asked me, it's like, man, you get a lot of, I've had professional paranormal researchers go, we can never get this amount of activity. How'd you do it? Because I treated them how they are. They're human. I treated them like a human. I carried a conversation. I interacted with them as if they were human, because they are human. Now, if you get into Bigfoot side of it, yeah, okay, they're humanoid. They're not what we consider human nowadays. And I think they're still humanoid. We're all humanoids, just different types. But you still have that. I've got vocalizations of Bigfoot speaking 2 different Native American languages. And that's right off my front porch. Literally got it. Now, episode 56, as a matter of fact, because that blew my mind when I caught it. These things can speak. Supernatural can speak. Paranormal can speak. Cryptids can speak. We all have a language, our own language, and then we have a language that we use to communicate. And with paranormal or supernatural, I think they have the ability to go, Ryan can speak English, so I'm going to speak to him in English so he can understand me. Jason speaks French, so I'm going to speak to him in French so that he can understand me. They have that ability to switch it. They don't have to learn it. I assure
you, I do not speak French at all.
It's just that concept that they have that ability to be able to do that. And I think that's where we get into the speaking thing. That's them doing it that way.
Yeah, I think Jason's right, though. I think we do have to start having conversations that people are uncomfortable with. If we're not honest with each other, we're not honest with ourselves, and we're doing a lot of damage that way. So got to be really careful with this and start putting everything out there that's to be known so people can be safe. William's in the chat. Big brother.
My brother William. Yeah, I love this stuff. And, people are very passionate about this subject, and it's like I said in the beginning of the show, we all have our own views on this stuff. Neither one of us is right. Neither one of us is wrong. We're looking at this from a different objective. And I love that.
We all got to meet in the middle and really have conversations that aren't necessarily going to be the nicest of conversations.
Yeah.
That's going to happen.
What an honest conversation is.
Yeah. You're going to ruffle feathers. Now look how many times, and no matter what field we're talking about, we ruffle feathers, because
if you're not ruffling feathers, you're not doing it right. Simple as that.
Yeah. So
what did Rush say? Beware the sound of one hand clapping.
Yeah. Yeah.
Again, just be careful with it. That's when you know.
Yeah, right.
That's when you know Dogman is nearby.
Uh-oh. What did I just do?
Yeah. What did you do? What did you do, Ryan?
I'm in trouble now.
we are 40 minutes past my regular time, but if you guys are still wanting to go, we can go. If not, we can start wrapping it up.
Sadly, I also do have work
Yeah.
early tomorrow, so yeah.
I got to take my puppies out pretty soon too. He's looking at me like, Daddy.
Yeah, I got dogs that's coming up to my chair too. So with wrapping this up, Jason, Jason, what's your final thoughts on the supernatural and the talk today?
You know what? The Bible's true, all of it.
Mm-hmm.
If it's again the supernatural, I would say every culture, even ones that I would disagree with, would all agree with one thing: don't talk to it if you're not supposed to. Essentially, I think a lot of things that are running around out there are like, oh, we want to go investigate that. I'm like, that is the supernatural equivalent of a white panel van with free candy scrawled on it, right? I think a lot of people are hurt by this because they're not protected. And I would just say, if there's one thing you come away with, it's like, look, there's 100 avenues to walk down to understand why the Bible is true and what truths can come out of it. But I'm just going to say this: the Bible is true, all of it.
Mm-hmm.
And if this is the only time you get to talk to you, I would suggest that's the book you should be reading. Is it going to give you a scientific answer for everything that ever pops up? No, but that's not what it's trying to do. It's trying to get you, the divine being that you are, in communion with the divine being that created you, because you matter, you are important, just like every other human being that has ever existed.
Yes.
The reason these things want to talk to you is because they know you're important too. And like that white panel van with free candy scrawled on it, they don't want good for you.
Mm-hmm. Ryan?
Well, I would say respect the supernatural, learn about it as much as you can, but don't underestimate it. You know, don't ever play with it like it's a toy. It's not there for your amusement or entertainment. You know, tread cautiously. Be very, very cautious and know what you're dealing with. You know, simple as that.
Yeah, and I'll agree. I mean, in so much of our research, so much of the stuff that we've interacted at, respect is a huge thing. And that's no matter what you're dealing with. That's supernatural, that's paranormal, that's cryptid. Respect is very key. You're going to have evil ones out there. You're going to have ones that's out there that's not necessarily always evil unless you piss them off. And that's where the respect thing comes in. You need to treat these things with respect. And that's respect goes both ways. Not only in itself, but respect the fact that these things can jack your world up. And you really, unless you know what you're doing, and which very few people nowadays do, it's hard to protect yourself against something like that.
Mm-hmm.
You know, just like when I was on that werewolf investigation, something told me I needed to do a tobacco offering at this certain location because I needed that protection. I didn't have my protection. And that's why I did it. I respected the elements that was there. I respected the supernatural entities that was there because something was coming after me and I was not prepared for defending myself against something like that. It's respect. And that in that aspect, that's respect in that, you know, that way too. So this is something we have to consider when it's doing this. We don't have the answers, folks. None of us in here are experts. These are our theories, our opinions, our hypotheses. This is things that we've experienced, we've researched, or we've heard. None of us in here is an expert. Take what we say. Don't take it for what we say granted. Take it with a grain of salt. Do your own research. Come up with your own opinions. Learn from other people, and that's how we come together to get somewhat close to what reality is on these things.
True.
I don't know if we'll ever get to the full truth of it, but I believe we can get to a step that we're semi-close to it, if that makes sense to y'all.
Or at
Maybe
least
not
an understanding
more
that allows us to survive it.
Yeah. So that being said, make sure I need to get with Rob too. Make sure you hit me up with the link to your guys' books so I can get that out there. I need to add that to the description so that way people can look for your books. After the outro is played, you're more than welcome to stay on if you want to. We can talk backstage. If you got to go, I understand it. Don't blame you. This has been freaking awesome. I've had a great time listening to everybody's opinions. I'm sitting back there soaking up like a sponge. I'm soaking up what you guys are saying, and I love it. This is why I love doing this type of stuff. And I'm super excited. I hope to have you guys back on again. I mean, me and Ryan's had a couple shows together already. I love this dude down there. He's awesome. But we'll definitely get something to go together again. I love doing these panels from time to time. You know, we're all in the same thing, so we may get together again and do a cryptid one because we got a lot of opinion on cryptids too. So I love this type of stuff.
Yep.
So with that being said, everybody give a shout out to Roxanne and William and Jeff. They were my mods in my chat tonight. Them guys are awesome. I can't do this stuff without them. For my new subscribers, my OGs, you're awesome. I appreciate every single one of you guys. All the little coins and jewels you guys are putting up there. I'm still not sure what those are about, but it's still cool, and I appreciate every single one of those things. So with that being said, I don't know what next week's topic is going to be about yet. I've got contractors coming in next week, so I mean next week's going to be back to pounding and grounding again because it's that time of year for me. So we'll get it figured out, and make sure you catch William Nighthawk show, Ryan show, Jason show, Rob show, and anybody else in there. Roxanne's been doing great at putting those out there, so I appreciate it. And as always, everybody, peace, love, and blessings to everyone. And we'll see you later. Goodbye.
Shadows where whispers hum. The air is thick where the strange things come. Behind the curtain where the fearless go. Welcome to the bizarre and the unknown. Dare to tread where the darkness hides. Your pulse will race, your breath will freeze in this realm of uncanny mysteries. Dare to tread where the darkness hides. Through the cracks of the world's thin sides. Join if you will take the dare. Where we learn of things that scare. The bizarre wears a wicked grin.